Richard Cross grabbed the man by his collar and slammed him against the wall. "You had one job, one. Watch the old man, and now he's dead, and I don't have what I need." "Sir, he never left the base. He never talked to anyone. We couldn't—" "Shut up." Cross released him and walked to the window of his penthouse office. Phoenix glittered below, but he wasn't looking at the lights. He was thinking about 70 years. 70 years of waiting. 70 years of his family searching for what Colonel Thomas Hartwell had hidden in that desert tomb. His phone rang. He answered without greeting. "We found something. The lawyer filed probate documents this morning. Hartwell had an heir." Cross turned slowly. "Who?" "Great niece, Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, lives in Oklahoma City, works at a diner, and sir, she's 7 months pregnant." Cross smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. A pregnant waitress. That's who the old man chose to guard his secret. "What do you want us to do?" "Find out everything about her, every debt, every weakness, every person she loves. I want to know what she eats for breakfast and what keeps her up at night." He paused. "And send someone to watch her. The moment she moves toward New Mexico, I want to know." And if she finds what's in that base, Cross picked up a photograph from his desk, his grandfather standing in front of Camp Resolute in 1945, the man who'd helped hide the fortune, the man who'd been betrayed by Thomas Hartwell. Then we take it from her, one way or another. He hung up the phone. 800 miles away, Sarah Mitchell had no idea that in 48 hours she would discover a fortune that powerful men had killed to protect, and powerful men would kill again to claim. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Watch until the very end, because what happens next will leave you breathless. And comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Sarah Mitchell's feet had gone numb 2 hours ago. She'd learned to recognize the stages. First came the burning, then the aching, then nothing at all. The nothing was dangerous because it meant she'd pushed past her limits, but pushing past limits was the only way she knew how to survive. "Order up, Sarah. Table 7's been waiting." She didn't look at Frank. Looking at him meant seeing his eyes drop to her pregnant belly, meant seeing the judgment he didn't bother to hide. "I'm on it." She grabbed the plates. Her back screamed. The baby shifted, pressing against her spine in that particular way that made her want to cry. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in months. Crying took energy she couldn't spare. Table 7 was a couple in their 60s. The woman smiled at Sarah with pity disguised as kindness. "Oh, honey, when are you due?" 2 months, ma'am." "Should you be working so hard? Where's the father?" Sarah set down the plates. "Gone. Can I get you anything else?" The woman's smile faltered. Her husband studied his menu like it contained the secrets of the universe. People never knew what to say when reality answered their polite questions. Sarah walked back to the counter. Her phone buzzed in her apron. She pulled it out, expecting Mrs. Chen. Unknown number, 3 words. "We need to talk." She deleted it. Wrong number, had to be. "Sarah." She turned. Frank stood there, with his clipboard not meeting her eyes. "You're closing tonight." "Frank, I've been here since 6 this morning." Linda called in. "Linda calls in every Thursday. I'm pregnant. I'm exhausted. I have a doctor's appointment at 8 tomorrow morning." Frank shrugged. "Find someone else or find another job." Sarah felt heat rise in her chest. "You know what, Frank? One day I'm going to walk out that door and never come back, and you're going to realize that the pregnant woman you treated like garbage was the only one keeping this place running." Frank stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. There's a difference." They stared at each other. The kitchen noise faded. The other waitresses pretended not to watch. Frank broke first. "Just close up tonight. We'll talk about your attitude tomorrow." He walked away. Sarah's hands were shaking. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She couldn't afford anything. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. "Your great-uncle left something for you. Something worth more than you can imagine. They're already looking for it. Call this number before they find you first." Sarah stared at the message. Her great-uncle, she didn't have a great-uncle. She didn't have anyone. She typed back before she could stop herself. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. "Someone who knows what's buried at Camp Resolute." "Someone who watched your great-uncle die. Someone who's trying to help you survive." Sarah's blood went cold. "What do you mean, watched him die?" "They killed him, Sarah. Made it look like heart failure. And when they couldn't make him talk, they started looking for his heir. They found you 3 days ago. You need to move, now." The message disappeared. Not deleted, just gone. Sarah's hands were trembling so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She looked around the diner. Everything seemed normal. Customers eating, coffee brewing, fluorescent lights buzzing. But something had shifted. Something fundamental. She grabbed her purse and walked out the back door without clocking out. In a car parked across the street, a man in a dark suit picked up his phone. She's moving. Something spooked her. Richard Cross's voice crackled through the speaker. Follow her. Don't let her out of your sight. Sarah drove home 20 miles over the speed limit, checking her rearview mirror every 30 seconds. No one seemed to be following her, but the text messages had rattled something loose inside her, some survival instinct she'd buried under exhaustion and routine. She parked in front of her building and sat in the darkness trying to think. Her great-uncle. The name floated up from somewhere deep. Thomas something. Her mother had mentioned him once, maybe twice. Military man. Hermit. Lived in the desert. Sarah had been 4 years old the only time they'd met. She remembered nothing except a tall man with sad eyes who'd asked if she liked adventure stories. She'd said yes. He'd smiled and said, "Good. You'll need that." 28 years later, those words echoed in her mind like prophecy. She climbed the 52 stairs to her apartment, one hand on the railing, one hand on her belly. The door stuck when she tried to open it. She shouldered it hard, felt something pop in her back, ignored it. Inside, darkness. She didn't turn on the lights. Electricity cost money. The couch waited. Not a bed. The bedroom was empty except for a second-hand crib and a stack of baby clothes from the church donation bin. Sarah lowered herself onto the cushions and stared at the ceiling. $47 in her checking account. Rent due in 8 days. $300 short. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Who are you? How do you know about my great-uncle?" A woman's voice. Older, tired. "My name isn't important. What's important is that you listen carefully. Thomas Hartwell died 3 weeks ago. He left everything to you. His lawyer will contact you soon if he hasn't already. When he does, you need to go to New Mexico immediately." Why? What's there? Something your great-uncle spent 70 years protecting. Something powerful people have been hunting for since 1945. Something worth killing for. Sarah's throat tightened. The text said someone killed him. They made it look natural. Thomas was 94. No one questioned a heart attack. The woman paused. But I was there that night. 2 men came to the base. They asked questions Thomas refused to answer. They left angry. 3 hours later, Thomas was dead. Who were they? I don't know their names, but I know who sent them. A man named Richard Cross. His family has been searching for what Thomas hid since the war ended. 3 generations of obsession. Sarah closed her eyes. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. Why are you telling me this? Because Thomas asked me to. He knew they'd come for him eventually. He knew they'd find you next. He wanted you to have a chance. A chance at what? At deciding what to do with what he left behind. The woman's voice softened. Thomas believed in you, Sarah. He followed your whole life from a distance. Your military service. Your struggles. Your strength. He said you were the only one in the family who would understand duty. Sarah felt tears threatening. I don't understand any of this. You will. Go to New Mexico, find what Thomas hid, and then decide whether it's worth fighting for. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the darkness for a long time. The baby kicked sharp and insistent. Someone knocked on her door. She froze. It was after midnight. No one knocked on doors after midnight with good intentions. Who is it, Miss Mitchell? A man's voice, professional. My name is Harold Harrison. I'm an attorney from Santa Fe. I've been trying to reach you about your great-uncle's estate. Sarah didn't move. How did you find my address? Your great-uncle kept detailed records. Please, Miss Mitchell, there are people searching for what Thomas left behind. Dangerous people. I drove 6 hours to warn you before they arrive. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't trust anyone. That's exactly what Thomas would have told you. But I have documents, legal proof of your inheritance, and information about what's waiting for you in New Mexico. Sarah crept to the door and looked through the peephole. An older man stood in the hallway, silver hair, rumpled suit. He held a briefcase in one hand and an envelope in the other. He looked scared. She opened the door but kept the chain on. Show me the documents. He slid the envelope through the gap. Sarah tore it open and scanned the contents. Legal letterhead, her name, her great-uncle's name, words like sole beneficiary and estate and property consisting of approximately 400 acres. This could be fake. It could be, but ask yourself this. Why would I drive through the night to deliver a fake document? What would I gain? Sarah studied his face. He looked like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders. The woman who called me. She said someone killed my great-uncle. Harrison's expression flickered. May I come in? What I need to tell you shouldn't be discussed in a hallway. Sarah hesitated. Then she unhooked the chain. Harrison entered quickly, closing the door behind him. He looked around the tiny apartment without judgment. 2 men visited my office yesterday, chum, he said. They claimed to be from the Department of Defense. They wanted to know about Thomas's estate. They wanted to know about you. What did you tell them? Nothing, but they'll find you anyway. They have resources I can't imagine. He set his briefcase on her coffee table and opened it. Thomas anticipated this. He left instructions, detailed instructions. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Sarah. Inside was a photograph, black and white, faded with age, a sprawling compound in the desert, buildings arranged in military precision. Camp Resolute Strim, Harrison said. Built in 1943 as a logistics hub for classified operations during World War II. Your great-uncle was assigned there as a young officer. When the war ended, everyone else left. Thomas stayed. Why? Because he was ordered to guard what they left behind. Classified assets, materials that couldn't be transported through normal channels. He was supposed to wait for further orders. Harrison's voice dropped. The orders never came. But Thomas waited anyway. For 70 years. Sarah looked at the photograph. What kind of assets? Thomas never told me directly, but I've been his lawyer for 30 years. I've seen the government inquiries, I've seen the private investigators, I've seen the offers millions of dollars for that property always refused. He met her eyes. Whatever's in that base, Miss Mitchell people have been willing to kill for it since 1945. The baby kicked hard. Sarah pressed her hand against her belly. Why me? I never knew him. I met him once when I was 4. He followed your military career. Knew you served 8 years as a logistics officer. Knew you were honorably discharged when you became pregnant. Harrison pulled another document from the folder. He wrote this 6 months ago. Read it. Sarah took the paper, her great-uncle's handwriting, shaky but precise. If I die before making contact, everything goes to Sarah. She's the only one who will understand. She knows duty. She knows sacrifice. She'll know what to do. Her eyes burned. I don't know what to do. I don't know anything. Then go to New Mexico and find out. But go quickly. Harrison handed her a set of keys and a piece of paper. The gate code, the keys to the main buildings. Whatever Thomas wanted you to find, it's there. And if those men find me first, Harrison was quiet for a moment. Thomas spent 70 years preparing for that possibility. He wouldn't have chosen you if he didn't believe you could handle it. He stood and walked to the door. One more thing. Thomas set up a trust before he died. Legal funds to protect his heir. If you need lawyers, security resources, call me. The trust will cover it. Why would he do that for someone he barely knew? Harrison opened the door and paused. Because your family, Miss Mitchell. And for Thomas, family was everything. Even family he'd never met. He left. Sarah sat alone in the darkness holding the photograph of Camp Resolute. 400 miles away, Richard Cross received a phone call. The lawyer visited her. She has the keys now. Cross leaned back in his chair. Then she'll go to New Mexico. Should we intercept her? No, let her go. Let her find the entrance. My grandfather spent years trying to crack that base's security. If the old man gave her the codes, she'll do our work for us. And then, Cross smiled, and then we take everything. The money, the documents, the entire fortune my family has been owed for 80 years. He paused. Make sure our people are ready. When she opens that vault, I want to be there. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch reading every document Harrison had left, but searching for answers that weren't there. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She called in sick to work. Frank threatened to fire her. She hung up on him. She called Mrs. Chen. Sarah, are you okay? You sound strange. Mrs. Chen, I need help. I need to borrow money for a trip. What kind of trip? I can't explain yet. But something happened. Something that might change everything. Sarah's voice cracked. I know I have no right to ask. I know I already owe you so much. Come to my apartment. 10 minutes later, Sarah stood in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, staring at $500 in cash. Mrs. Chen, this is too much. It's emergency money. I've been saving it for 30 years. The old woman pressed the envelope into Sarah's hands. "When my husband died, a stranger helped me. She never asked to be repaid. She said to help someone else when I could." Mrs. Chen squeezed Sarah's fingers. "You've been good to me. You check on me when I'm sick. You never ask for anything. Take this money and go do what you need to do." Sarah hugged her carefully. "I don't know when I can pay you back. When you can, you will. And if you can't, you'll help someone else. That's how it works." Mrs. Chen pulled back and studied Sarah's face. "Be careful. Whatever you're walking into, remember you're not just carrying yourself anymore." Sarah touched her belly. "I know. Call me when you get there." "I will." The drive to New Mexico took 14 hours. Sarah stopped for gas twice, for food once, for bathrooms more times than she could count. Pregnancy didn't care about road trips. She crossed into Texas as the sun rose. The land flattened, stretched, became something ancient and indifferent. Cities shrank to towns. Towns shrank to nothing. She was somewhere in the Panhandle when she noticed the black SUV. It appeared in her rearview mirror around noon, stayed 3 cars back. Never closer, never farther. Sarah changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. She took an exit. The SUV took the same exit. Her heart hammered. She pulled into a gas station and parked near the entrance where cameras would capture everything. The SUV drove past without stopping, but she saw the driver turn his head, saw him looking directly at her. Sarah sat in her car for 20 minutes, hands shaking before she felt safe enough to continue. She didn't see the SUV again, but she knew. Someone was watching. She reached Santa Fe at midnight and found a motel that accepted cash. The room smelled like cigarettes and despair, but she was too exhausted to care. She lay in the darkness with her hand on her belly. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered to her baby. "I don't know if this is real or if I've lost my mind, but we're here, and tomorrow we're going to find out what your great-great-uncle died protecting." The baby kicked. Sarah took it as agreement. Morning came too fast. Sarah showered, dressed in the cleanest clothes she'd packed, and drove to Harrison's office. He was waiting for her with coffee and more documents. "You made it." "Good. I was worried." "Someone followed me. Black SUV, Texas plates." Harrison's face went pale. "They're moving faster than I expected. You need to get to Camp Resolute today, before they realize where you're going." "Who are they?" "The men who visited my office work for a man named Richard Cross. His family has been hunting for what's in that base since 1945. His grandfather was involved in the original operations. He believes he's owed whatever Thomas was guarding." "Is he?" "That's not for me to decide. It's for you." Harrison handed her a map. 2 hours northwest, past a town called Dusty Springs. The base is 10 miles beyond that. Sarah studied the map. Red lines marked the route. A circle marked the destination. "What am I going to find there?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know exactly, but I know Thomas spent 70 years protecting it. I know powerful people are willing to kill for it. And I know Thomas chose you out of everyone in the world to decide what happens next." He walked her to the door. "Be careful, Miss Mitchell. Trust no one. And call me if you need help." Sarah drove northwest into emptiness. The landscape shifted from desert scrub to open wasteland. Red rocks rose like monuments to forgotten gods. Dusty Springs appeared without warning. A gas station, a general store, a post office. Population 312. She stopped for gas. The attendant was a weathered man in his 70s, with eyes that had seen too much. "You lost Miss looking for Camp Resolute." His expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. "Nothing out there but sand and ghosts." "My great-uncle lived there." "Tom Hartwell." "Not a question. You're his people. I'm his heir." The old man studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned closer and dropped his voice. "Tom was a good man, kept to himself, came to town once a month, paid cash, asked about the weather, never said much else. He glanced around like he was afraid of being overheard. 2 weeks ago, some men came through asking about him. City men, expensive suits, wrong kind of eyes." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What did you tell them?" "Same thing I'm telling you. Nothing out there but sand and ghosts." He handed her the change. 10 miles down the road, dirt track on the right. "You'll see the fence." He paused. "Tom kept that place locked up for a reason. Be careful what doors you open." Sarah drove. The sign appeared exactly where he'd said. Faded green metal. Bullet holes rusted through. Camp Resolute. Private property. No trespassing. She turned onto the dirt road. Her car bounced over ruts that hadn't been maintained in decades. Dust rose in clouds behind her. 3 miles in, she reached the gate. Chain link topped with barbed wire, a heavy padlock. Sarah got out and approached the keypad. She entered the code Harrison had given her. The lock clicked. The gate swung open. She drove through, stopped, got out, closed the gate behind her. Protocol, old habits. Another mile. Then the compound appeared. Sarah stopped the car and stared. Massive. Dozens of buildings spread across the desert floor. Barracks in perfect rows. A command center rising in the middle. Storage facilities. Motor pool. Everything painted the same faded tan. And silence. Complete, absolute silence. She drove slowly through the compound. Most buildings had boarded windows. Crooked doors, weeds pushing through concrete. She parked in front of the command center. The door was locked, but one of Harrison's keys fit. Inside, cool air. Dust motes and shafts of light. A corridor stretching into shadow. She used her phone as a flashlight. Offices lined the hallway. Empty desks, filing cabinets, the bones of abandoned bureaucracy. At the end of the hall, a door with a nameplate. Colonel T. Hartwell. Sarah's hand trembled as she turned the knob. The office was intact, preserved. A desk against the wall. Papers stacked neatly. A cot in the corner with a folded blanket. Her great-uncle had lived here. Actually lived here. For 70 years. On the desk, a single envelope. Sarah, her name in handwriting she'd never seen but somehow recognized. She opened it. Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Good. I've been tired for a long time. I don't expect you to remember me. We met once when you were 4. You asked me why I never smiled. I told you I was saving them up. You laughed and said that was silly. You were right. I'm leaving you this place because you're the only one who might understand. You served. You know duty. You know the weight of secrets you can't tell anyone. This base isn't what it seems. During the war, it was a logistics hub for classified operations. Money, supplies, intelligence. Things that moved through here weren't supposed to exist. When the war ended, assets were left behind. Buried. Forgotten. I was ordered to secure them. So I did. For 70 years. There's a room beneath this building. The entrance is in the storage closet behind my desk. The code is your birthday. Day, month, year. What you do with what's down there is up to you. But I'm trusting you to do the right thing. Not the easy thing. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. You always have been. Thomas. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she looked at the storage closet. An ordinary door. Wooden. Slightly warped. She opened it. Shelves lined with supplies, boxes, uniforms. And at the back, almost invisible, a seam in the wall. A hidden door. Sarah pushed aside the shelves. They moved easily like they'd been moved many times before. Behind them a keypad. Modern. Out of place. Her birthday. She entered the numbers. 071519992. A mechanical click. The door shifted inward. Darkness beyond. The smell of concrete and machine oil. Metal stairs descending into nothing. Sarah took a breath and started down. 20 steps. 30. 40. The air grew colder. Darker. Then the stairs ended. A corridor stretched before her. Concrete walls. Dead fluorescent lights. Doors on either side. All closed. All locked. And at the end, a massive steel door. Sarah walked forward. Her footsteps echoed like heartbeats. The vault door had a keypad. She tried her birthday. Nothing. She tried the year the base was built. Nothing. Then she noticed numbers scratched into the metal. Faded. Almost invisible. 1945. The year the war ended. She entered the code. The keypad beeped. Mechanisms groaned. Heavy bolts slid back. The door cracked open. Sarah pulled it wider, and her knees buckled. The room was enormous. 50 feet across. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked floor to ceiling. A conference table in the center. Maps spread across its surface. Radio equipment along one wall. And at the back, behind a chain-link cage, something that caught her flashlight and threw it back in golden reflections. Gold bars. Dozens of them. Sarah moved closer. Her breath came short. The cage wasn't locked. She opened it. Gold. Stamped with dates. 1943, 1944, 1945. She touched a bar. Cold, heavy, real. Behind the gold boxes, she opened one. Bonds. Bearer bonds. Stacks of them. Another box. Cash. Bills so old they looked like artifacts. Sarah found a clipboard near the door. An inventory list. Asset manifest. Camp Resolute secure storage. Classification top secret. Gold bullion 875 bars. Bearer bonds total estimated value 93 million, operating capital 120 million on this currency. Total estimated value 295 million, authorization Colonel T. Hartwell. Status secured. Pending operational reactivation. At the bottom, handwritten operations canceled March 1946. Assets remain secured. Awaiting orders that will never come. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by more wealth than she could comprehend. $295 million. Hidden for 70 years. Guarded by a man who lived and died alone because he'd made a promise. The baby kicked. Sarah pressed her hand against her belly and began to cry. Not from fear, not from relief, but from understanding what her great-uncle had carried all those years, and the terrible knowledge that now she carried it too. Above her, the desert sun beat down on silent buildings. Below, history waited, and Sarah Mitchell realized her life would never be the same. She sat in the darkness for what felt like hours. The cold seeped through her clothes. The baby shifted restlessly. Finally, she stood. There was more to explore. At the back of the vault, another door. Smaller, unmarked. She found the word scratched near the handle. Sentinel. She entered it on the keypad. The door opened. A smaller room. A massive table covered with maps. Filing cabinets, communication equipment, and a safe. Large, military grade. Sarah tried combinations until she found the one that worked. 8/15/45, the day Japan surrendered. Inside documents, and a metal box. She opened it. Bearer bonds, separate from the vault. Personal, and a letter. To whoever finds this, these bonds are mine. $20 million. Payment for services rendered. Legal. Clean. I never touched them. I didn't stay for money. But you're not me. You have a child coming. You have a life to build. Take these. Use them. You've earned them. The $295 million in the vault is different. That money belongs to history, to promises made and broken. What you do with it is your choice. Thomas Sarah stared at the bonds. $20 million, legally hers. And in the other room, $295 million more. She thought about her apartment, her 3 jobs, her $47. She thought about her baby. She thought about her great-uncle alone for 70 years guarding a promise no one remembered. And she realized something. He hadn't just left her money. He'd left her a choice. The easy thing or the right thing. Sarah closed the box. She walked back through the vault, up the stairs, into her great-uncle's office. The desert sun had moved. Hours had passed. Her phone showed 15 missed calls, and one text message from an unknown number. We know you found it. We're coming. You have 12 hours to decide if you want to negotiate or if you want to fight. Sarah stared at the message. Then she typed back 2 words. I'll fight. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Her great-uncle had trusted her, and she wasn't going to let him down. 12 hours. Sarah stared at her phone, her heart pounding against her ribs. The baby kicked hard, sensing her mother's fear. She typed another message. Who are you? The response came instantly. Someone who's been waiting a long time for this moment. Your great-uncle stole something that belongs to my family. I want it back. He didn't steal anything. He was following orders. Orders from dead men. The war ended 80 years ago. That money should have been ours. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then take it up with the government. I'd rather take it up with you, face to face, tonight. She didn't respond. Instead, she called Harold Harrison. He answered on the second ring. Miss Mitchell, did you find it? I found everything, and someone else knows. They're threatening me. Silence on the line. Then Harrison's voice sharp with urgency. Where are you now? Still at the base, in my great-uncle's office. Get out. Get out right now. Drive to the motel in Dusty Springs and wait for me there. Don't talk to anyone. Don't open the door for anyone except me. Mr. Harrison, there's almost $300 million in this vault. I can't just leave it. That money has been there for 70 years. It can wait one more night. Your life cannot. His voice cracked. Please, Sarah. I promised Thomas I would protect you. Let me keep that promise. Sarah looked around the office. Her great-uncle's cot, his books, his 70 years of solitude. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up and walked back to the vault one last time. The gold gleamed in her flashlight beam. The bonds sat in their boxes. The cash waited in neat stacks. $295 million. And somewhere out there, people willing to kill for it. Sarah sealed the vault, climbed the stairs, and closed the hidden door. She rearranged the shelves in the storage closet exactly as she'd found them. Then she drove. The sun was setting when she reached Dusty Springs. The motel had 6 rooms. She took the one farthest from the road, paid cash, and locked herself inside. 8:47 p.m. She sat on the bed with her back against the wall facing the door. Her phone lay beside her. The metal box with the $20 million in bonds sat on the nightstand. She should have left it in the vault, but something had made her take it. Insurance, maybe. Or proof. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Running won't help. We know where you are. Sarah's blood went cold. She looked at the window. The curtains were drawn, but suddenly they felt paper thin. Another buzz. The old man in room 3 is one of ours. The woman at the front desk called us when you checked in. You're surrounded, Sarah. But it doesn't have to end badly. She was on her feet before she finished reading. She grabbed the metal box, grabbed her bag, and moved to the bathroom. The window was small, but she was desperate. She climbed onto the toilet, pushed open the window, and squeezed through. Her pregnant belly scraped against the frame. Pain shot through her abdomen, but she kept moving. She dropped to the ground behind the motel. Darkness had fallen. She could hear voices near the front entrance. Her car was in the parking lot, 20 feet away. Visible. She couldn't reach it. Sarah pressed herself against the wall and tried to think. Her phone buzzed again, but she didn't look at it. Footsteps approached. 2 men talking in low voices. Check the back, she might have run. In her condition, she's not running anywhere. Sarah held her breath. The men passed within 10 feet of her hiding spot. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. They rounded the corner and disappeared. She had seconds, maybe less. Sarah ran, not toward her car, toward the darkness behind the motel, toward the empty desert, toward anywhere that wasn't here. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed, and the baby pressed against her bladder with agonizing pressure. She ran until she found a drainage ditch and threw herself into it, gasping for air. 9:23 p.m. She lay in the dirt, staring at the stars, trying to slow her heartbeat. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but the number was different. Not unknown. A number she recognized. Harold Harrison. Sarah, where are you? I'm at the motel. Your car is here, but you're not. They found me, she whispered. They were waiting. I had to run. Where are you now? I don't know. A ditch somewhere. Behind the motel, I can see the highway. Stay there. I'm coming. How do I know I can trust you? Harrison was quiet for a moment. You don't, but I'm the only chance you have right now. Please, Sarah, let me help you. She gave him directions as best she could. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared on the road. A car pulled onto the shoulder. Harrison got out alone. Sarah? Over here. He found her in the ditch and helped her climb out. His face was pale in the moonlight. Are you hurt? I don't think so, but the baby... She pressed her hand against her belly. I can feel her moving. I think she's okay. We need to get you to a doctor. No hospitals. They'll find me. Sarah, I said no. Her voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening. Who are these people? Why do they want this money so badly? Harrison guided her to his car. I'll explain everything, but not here. Not in the open. They drove for an hour, heading east away from Dusty Springs, away from Camp Resolute, away from everything. Harrison took back roads, checking his mirrors constantly. Finally, he pulled into a rest stop and killed the engine. 10:58 p.m. The man who's after you is named Richard Cross, Harrison said. His grandfather was Colonel William Cross, one of the officers involved in the original Camp Resolute operations. What operations? During the war camp, Resolute was a logistics hub for classified missions. Black operations, the kind that don't appear in history books. Harrison's voice dropped. Money moved through that base. Gold, bonds, cash, funds for resistance fighters in Europe. Bribes for intelligence officers in Asia. Payment for operations that officially never happened. Sarah listened, her hand resting on her belly. When the war ended, the operations were canceled, but the money remained. Your great-uncle was ordered to secure it until further notice. Harrison shook his head. The notice never came. The government forgot. The files were buried. The men who knew about Camp Resolute died, or retired, or moved on. But someone remembered. Colonel Cross remembered. He'd been promised a share of those funds for his role in the operations. When the money disappeared, he spent the rest of his life trying to find it. Harrison met her eyes. He passed that obsession to his son and his grandson. Richard Cross? 3 generations of searching, 3 generations of believing they're owed a fortune that was never theirs to begin with. Sarah looked out at the dark highway. How did they find out about me? Your great-uncle's death was in the papers. Small notice, but someone was watching. They tracked the probate filing. Found your name. Harrison's voice tightened. I should have warned you sooner. I should have. You did warn me. I just didn't understand how serious it was. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she'd opened that vault. What do I do now? Harrison turned to face her. You have 3 options. 1, you negotiate with Cross. Give him what he wants in exchange for your safety. How much does he want? All of it. The entire $295 million. Sarah shook her head. My great-uncle spent 70 years protecting that money. I'm not handing it over to some entitled grandson who thinks he's owed something. Then option 2, you disappear. Take the $20 million in personal bonds your great-uncle left you and vanish. New name, new life, somewhere far away. Sarah touched her belly. Run forever. Raise my daughter looking over my shoulder. It's safer than fighting. What's option 3? Harrison's expression shifted. Something like admiration crossed his face. Option 3 is you fight. You claim the entire inheritance legally. You expose what Richard Cross has done. You take control of those assets and use them for something meaningful. Can I win? I don't know. The government will get involved once they realize what's in that vault. Cross has money lawyers' connections. You're a pregnant waitress with $47 in her checking account. Harrison paused. But you have something they don't. What? The truth, documentation, 70 years of records your great-uncle kept, and the moral high ground. He leaned forward. Thomas spent his entire life protecting something he believed in. If you fight for it, you honor his sacrifice. If you run or surrender, everything he did was for nothing. Sarah closed her eyes. The baby kicked. I already told them I'd fight. I know. I saw the message. Harrison almost smiled. Thomas was right about you. What do we do first? First, we get you somewhere safe. Then we contact a lawyer I know who specializes in government claims. And then... He took a breath. Then we go public. We tell the world what's in that vault before Cross can bury it. Won't that make things worse? It'll make things complicated, but complicated is better than dead. Harrison started the car. There's a cabin about 2 hours from here, off the grid. No one knows about it except me. You can rest there while I make some calls. Sarah nodded. Exhaustion was catching up with her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Mr. Harrison. Yes? Why are you helping me? You barely knew my great-uncle. You don't know me at all. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. 30 years ago, I was a young lawyer with gambling debts and a drinking problem. I was about to lose everything. Your great-uncle found out somehow. He paid off my debts, got me into treatment, and never asked for anything in return. He just said that someday someone would need my help, and when that day came, I should remember what he did for me. Harrison's voice was thick. This is me remembering. They drove through the night. Sarah slept in the passenger seat, her hand curled protectively around her belly. When she woke, the sun was rising over mountains she didn't recognize. 6:34 a.m., day 2. The cabin was small, but solid. A bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, a wood stove. Harrison had stocked it with food and supplies. Stay here, he said. Don't answer the door. Don't use your phone except to call me. I'll be back tomorrow with reinforcements. What kind of reinforcements? The kind that can win wars. He handed her a burner phone. This number reaches me directly. Call if anything happens. Then he was gone, and Sarah was alone. She spent the morning exploring the cabin, eating whatever she could find, trying to rest. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. $295 million. A fortune she'd never asked for. A burden she'd never wanted. A fight she'd never imagined. At noon, she called Mrs. Chen. Sarah, I've been worried sick. Are you okay? I'm okay. I'm sorry I haven't called. Things got complicated. What kind of complicated? Sarah hesitated. How do you explain $295 million to someone who's never had more than a few thousand in the bank? The inheritance was bigger than I expected. A lot bigger. And there are people who want to take it from me. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. Dangerous people. Yes. Then you be careful. You hear me? You be very careful. That baby needs her mother. I know. Do you need help? I don't have much, but... No, Mrs. Chen, you've already given me more than I can ever repay. Just, if anyone comes asking about me, you don't know anything, okay? I never knew anything in the first place. Mrs. Chen's voice hardened. You do what you need to do, Sarah, and when it's over, you come home. I will. Sarah hung up and stared at the phone. Home? Did she even have one anymore? At 3:17 p.m., the burner phone rang. Sarah, it's Harrison. I have Catherine Wells on the line. She's the lawyer I told you about. A woman's voice came through sharp and confident. Miss Mitchell, I've reviewed the documents Harold sent me. I have to say this is the most extraordinary case I've ever seen. Can you help me? I can try, but I need to be honest with you. The government is going to claim those assets the moment they find out they exist. Richard Cross is going to fight you with every resource he has, and you're going to be in the middle of a legal battle that could take years. I don't have years. I have a baby coming in 2 months. Then we need to move fast. Catherine's tone shifted to pure business. Here's what I propose. We file for legal recognition of your inheritance immediately. We document everything in that vault before anyone can claim it was tampered with, and we go public with the story before Cross, or the government can control the narrative. Go public how? I know a reporter at the Washington Post. She covers government accountability stories. A pregnant waitress inheriting a forgotten-what-to fortune that the Pentagon lost track of, that's front-page news. Sarah's stomach churned. I don't want to be famous. Famous might be the only thing that keeps you alive. Right now, Cross can make you disappear and no one would notice. But if your face is on every news channel in America, he can't touch you without bringing the whole world down on his head. The logic was brutal and undeniable. Okay, Sarah said. Do it. 7:42 p.m. Day 2. Harrison returned to the cabin with 2 people. Catherine Wells was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The other was a younger woman with a press badge around her neck. Sarah Mitchell, meet Jennifer Rowe, Washington Post. Jennifer shook Sarah's hand. Miss Mitchell, I've been covering government waste and corruption for 15 years. I thought I'd seen everything, and then Harold told me your story. It's not my story, it's my great-uncle's. It's both. Jennifer pulled out a recorder. I want to tell it right, all of it. The sacrifice, the secrets, the fortune, and the fight you're about to take on. They talked for 3 hours. Sarah told Jennifer everything from the first strange text message to the vault beneath Camp Resolute. She showed her the documents, the photographs, the letter her great-uncle had left. Jennifer listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, the reporter sat back and shook her head. This is going to change everything for you. You understand that? I know. Once this story runs, there's no going back. The government will investigate. Cross will come at you harder. Every reporter in the country will want a piece of you. I know, and you still want to do it. Sarah touched her belly. The baby was quiet, now sleeping. My great-uncle spent 70 years alone in the desert because he believed some things were worth protecting. He gave up everything, marriage, family, a normal life, because he made a promise. She met Jennifer's eyes. I'm not going to let his sacrifice mean nothing. Jennifer nodded slowly. Then let's make sure the world hears his story. 11:15 p.m. Day 2. After Jennifer left, Catherine spread documents across the cabin's small table. We need to talk about strategy. The legal battle is going to be complicated. How complicated? The government will argue that those assets belong to the Treasury. They were appropriated during wartime for military operations. The fact that they were forgotten doesn't change their ownership. But they abandoned them for 70 years. That's our argument. Abandonment. Your great-uncle maintained those assets at his own expense with no support from the government. Under property law, that gives you a strong claim. Catherine shuffled papers. But here's where it gets interesting. Those operations your great-uncle funded, they saved lives. Thousands of lives. Resistance fighters, intelligence agents, soldiers behind enemy lines. What does that have to do with anything? It means those assets have historical significance beyond their monetary value. And it means there might be families out there, descendants of the people those operations helped, who would support your claim. Sarah frowned. How do we find them? Your great-uncle kept records. Detailed records. Operations dates, names. Catherine pulled out a folder. I've already started cross-referencing. There are at least a dozen families who might be willing to testify that the money your great-uncle protected served its purpose. It was overwhelming. Legal strategy, media exposure, historical research, all while 7 months pregnant and running from men who wanted her dead. I need to sleep, Sarah said. I can't think anymore. Catherine nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The baby shifted pressed against her ribs. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The baby kicked, hard, insistent. Sarah almost laughed. Okay, message received. She closed her eyes and dreamed of gold gleaming in the darkness. 6:00 a.m., day 3. Sarah woke to the sound of a car approaching. She was on her feet instantly, heart racing. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her face tight with concern. Stay here, Harrison's checking. Through the window, Sarah watched Harrison walk toward a black SUV that had pulled up outside the cabin. 2 men got out. Suits, government badges. Miss Mitchell. One of them called out. We're with the Department of Defense. We'd like to ask you some questions. Harrison stepped between them and the cabin. My client isn't answering questions without her lawyer present. We're not here to arrest anyone. We just want to talk. Then talk to me. I'm her legal representative. The agents exchanged glances. We know about Camp Resolute. We know about the vault. And we know Miss Mitchell was there yesterday. Sarah's blood went cold. They knew. Already. How? She whispered. Catherine was on her phone typing rapidly. Cross must have contacts in the government. He tipped them off. What do? We stick to the plan. Let Harrison handle them, and we get you out of here before they decide talking isn't enough. The conversation outside grew heated. Sarah could hear Harrison's voice rising, invoking legal protections, demanding warrants. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Enjoying your visitors. That's just the beginning. By this time tomorrow, every federal agency in the country will know your name, and they'll all want a piece of that pie. A pause. Last chance, Sarah. Negotiate with me or fight everyone. Sarah typed back with trembling fingers. I told you, I'll fight. Then you'll lose. Maybe, but at least I'll lose standing up. She blocked the number. Catherine grabbed her arm. Back door. Now. Harrison will keep them busy. They slipped out through the kitchen. Catherine's car was parked behind the cabin, hidden from view. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses and lawyers on standby. Catherine started the engine. We're going to Washington. 8:34 a.m., day 3. They drove east, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks. Catherine called ahead, arranging meetings, coordinating with Jennifer Rowe's editor. The story runs tomorrow morning. Front page, above the fold. Sarah stared out the window at the passing landscape. Then everyone will know. Everyone will know, and once they do, Cross can't touch you without the whole world watching. What about the government? The government's going to have bigger problems than you. They're about to explain how they lost track of $295 million for 7 decades. Catherine almost smiled. Trust me, they're going to be more interested in covering their own asses than prosecuting a pregnant waitress. They reached Washington at midnight. Catherine had arranged a hotel room under a false name, paid in cash. Sarah sat on the bed, too wired to sleep. Tomorrow, her life would become public property. Tomorrow, everyone would know her name. Her phone rang. Harrison's number. Sarah, are you safe? We're in Washington. Catherine's here. Good. The agents left after I threatened to call the FBI about harassment. But they'll be back. I know. Jennifer's story is going to change everything. Are you ready? Sarah looked at her reflection in the window. A tired, pregnant woman who'd been a waitress 3 days ago. No, she admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. That's what courage is. Doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. Harrison's voice softened. Your great-uncle would be proud of you. I hope so. Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow's going to be the longest day of your life. Sarah hung up. She lay in the darkness, hand on her belly, and waited for dawn. 5:47 a.m. Day 4. Sarah was already awake when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Forgotten Fortune, how the Pentagon lost track of $295 million in Wabaidarot 2 assets. She opened the article. Her name was there. Her photo, the one from her Army service record. The story of Camp Resolute, of her great-uncle's sacrifice of the vault, hidden beneath the desert. Within an hour, her phone was exploding. Calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Texts from reporters requesting interviews. Emails forwarded by Catherine from news organizations around the world. The story had gone viral. By noon, it was on every major network. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Anchors read the story with expressions of disbelief. Commentators debated what should happen to the money. Social media erupted with opinions. And in a penthouse in Phoenix, Richard Cross watched his 70-year family obsession slip through his fingers. "Sir, the story's everywhere. We can't contain it." Cross stood at his window, perfectly still. "Who talked? We don't know, but it doesn't matter now. The government's launching an investigation. The FBI wants to interview the girl. We can't get near her without attracting attention." "Then we wait." Cross turned slowly. "The story will fade. The investigation will drag on for months. And eventually everyone will forget." "What if she doesn't forget?" "She's a pregnant waitress. She has no money, no power, no connections." Cross's voice hardened. "She'll break. They all do." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure. Something about Sarah Mitchell bothered him. Something in her eyes. 1:23 p.m., day 4. Sarah sat in a conference room at Catherine's law firm, surrounded by lawyers, advisors, and a single FBI agent who'd been assigned as her liaison. "Miss Mitchell, the government is prepared to offer you a settlement." Sarah looked at the agent. "What kind of settlement?" "Acknowledgement of your inheritance rights to the Camp Resolute property, a finder's fee of $5 million for the vault's contents, and immunity from any charges related to the removal of classified materials. $5 million out of $295 million. The rest belongs to the Treasury." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "My great-uncle spent 70 years guarding that money. He gave up his entire life. And you want to give me a finder's fee? It's a generous offer considering..." "Considering what?" "That your government forgot about $295 million for 7 decades that you only care now because it's on the news." Sarah stood up at her belly pressing against the edge of the table. "My great-uncle died protecting something you abandoned. He honored a promise you broke, and now you want to sweep it under the rug with a check." The agent's expression didn't change. "This offer won't be on the table forever." "Good, because my answer is no." Catherine intervened smoothly. "My client is prepared to litigate this matter fully. We believe the government's claim to these assets was forfeited through abandonment." "That's not how the law works." "Actually, it might be. We'll let a judge decide." The agent gathered his papers. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but it's my mistake to make." After the agent left, Catherine turned to Sarah with something like admiration. "You know they're going to fight hard." "I know." "You know this could take years." "I know." "And you still said no." Sarah touched her belly. "My great-uncle didn't spend 70 years in the desert so I could take $5 million and walk away. He trusted me to do the right thing. The right thing isn't letting them buy my silence." Catherine nodded slowly. "Then we fight. We fight." 4:56 p.m. Day 4. The first lawsuit was filed that afternoon. Mitchell v. United States Department of Defense. The legal world exploded. Lawyers analyzed the case on cable news. Law professors debated property rights on podcasts. Everyone had an opinion about the pregnant waitress taking on the Pentagon. And somewhere in the chaos, Sarah Mitchell sat in a hotel room eating room service pizza, wondering how her life had become this. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Miss Mitchell, my name is William Bradley. I served under your great-uncle in 1945. Sarah's breath caught. "You knew him." "I knew him, and I watched the news today." The old man's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm 96 years old. I never thought I'd see the day that someone finally told the truth about Camp Resolute." "What was he like, my great-uncle?" "Tom Hartwell was the finest officer I ever served with. Honest, loyal, the kind of man who'd give you his last ration and pretend he wasn't hungry." Bradley paused. "When the war ended and everyone else went home, Tom stayed. I asked him why. You know what he said, Bah? What? He said someone had to remember. Someone had to stand guard over what we'd sacrificed for. He said if he walked away, everything we'd fought for would just disappear into some bureaucrat's filing cabinet." Bradley's voice cracked. "He was right, and now you're fighting the same fight he fought." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can win." "Winning isn't the point. Standing up is the point. Fighting when it would be easier to surrender." Bradley took a shaky breath. "I'm too old to fight beside you, Miss Mitchell. But if you need me to testify to tell the world what Tom Hartwell did, I'll be there. I owe him that much." "Thank you. Thank you so much." "No, thank you for remembering him, for fighting for what he believed in." Bradley's voice faded. "He would have been proud of you. I know I am." The line went dead. Sarah sat in the silence, tears still falling, and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. 8:11 p.m., day 4. Catherine arrived with dinner and news. 3 more veterans have called. They all served with your great-uncle. They all want to testify. How did they find out? The story spread to veteran communities online. They're organizing support. Catherine set down containers of Chinese food. And there's something else. A group of historians has contacted us. They've been researching classified Wubby 2 operations for years. Your great-uncle's records are exactly what they've been looking for. Sarah opened a container and stared at the contents without appetite. What does that mean for the case? It means we can prove those assets served their purpose. They funded operations that saved Luis. They supported resistance fighters who helped liberate Europe. They weren't just sitting in a vault for 70 years. They were the legacy of something meaningful. And that helps us how? It helps us argue that the money should go to something meaningful now, not back into the government's black hole, not into Richard Cross's pockets. Catherine sat down across from Sarah. We can propose a foundation, a memorial, something that honors your great-uncle's sacrifice and the people those operations helped. Sarah looked up. A foundation for veterans, for the families of people who served in classified operations and never got recognition, for single parents struggling to survive. Catherine smiled slightly. We can turn this into something bigger than a lawsuit. We can turn it into a legacy. For the first time in days, Sarah felt something other than fear and exhaustion. She felt hope. Yes, she said. Let's do that. 11:33 p.m. Day 4. Sarah lay in bed too wired to sleep despite her exhaustion. The baby was active, somersaulting in her belly like she knew something big was happening. Your great-great-uncle would have loved you, Sarah whispered. He spent his whole life protecting something, waiting for someone who would understand. She touched her stomach. I think that someone is us. Her phone buzzed. One final message of the day. Unknown number, but different from Cross's messages. The area code was New Mexico. I knew your great-uncle. I was with him when he died. He asked me to give you a message, but I was afraid to reach out until now. His last words were about you. He said, tell Sarah to trust herself. Tell her the answer is in the war room. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't tell her in person. And tell her I've been saving up my smiles. They're all for her. Sarah's tears came again, hot and fast. She cried until she had nothing left. And then she slept dreaming of a man she'd never really known, who had loved her enough to give her everything. The message about her great-uncle's last words haunted Sarah through the night. She woke at 5:17 a.m. on day 5, with his words echoing in her mind. Trust yourself. The answer is in the war room. I've been saving up my smiles. She sat up in bed, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. The baby was still sleeping peacefully, while Sarah's mind raced. The war room. She'd been there. She'd seen the maps, the filing cabinets, the communication equipment, but she hadn't searched everything. She'd been too overwhelmed by the vault, by the gold, by the enormity of what she'd discovered. What had she missed? Her phone rang. Catherine's number. Sarah, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Richard Cross filed a competing claim this morning. He's arguing that his grandfather was a co-founder of the Camp Resolute operations and that the Cross family is entitled to half of all assets. Sarah's stomach dropped. Can he do that? He can try. His lawyers submitted documents allegedly proving Colonel William Cross's involvement in establishing the base. Catherine's voice was tight. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. Both sides will present preliminary evidence. Tomorrow, I thought these things took months. They usually do, but Cross has connections. He got the hearing expedited. Catherine paused. There's more. The government is sending representatives. They want to observe the proceedings before deciding whether to intervene directly. Sarah closed her eyes. So now I'm fighting Cross and the government at the same time. Not yet. The government is watching, not acting. But if Cross's claim looks strong, they might side with him just to simplify things. What do? We need evidence that contradicts Cross's documents. Something that proves your great-uncle was the sole authority at Camp Resolute. Catherine's voice sharpened. Is there anything else in that base? Anything you might have overlooked? Sarah thought about the war room, the filing cabinet she hadn't opened, the safe she'd barely explored. Maybe. I need to go back. That's too dangerous. Cross has people watching the property. Then we go with protection. FBI escort security team, whatever it takes. Sarah's voice hardened. My great-uncle said the answer is in the war room. I need to find it. 7:23 a.m. Day 5. 2 hours later, Sarah was in a government SUV heading back to New Mexico. Catherine sat beside her. 2 FBI agents rode in front. The Bureau agreed to provide security for the property inspection, Catherine explained. They're not taking sides yet, but they don't want anyone tampering with evidence before the hearing. Sarah watched the landscape blur past. How long until we get there? 6 hours. We'll arrive by early afternoon. 6 hours. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Harold Harrison. Miss Mitchell, I heard about the hearing. How are you holding up? I'm going back to Camp Resolute. There's something I missed. What do you mean? My great-uncle left me a message. His last words. He said the answer is in the war room. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. I searched the vault, but I didn't go through everything in the war room. There might be documents that prove Cross's claim is false. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Be careful, Sarah. Cross is desperate now. Desperate men do dangerous things. I know. Call me when you find something. 1:47 p.m. Day 5. The gates of Camp Resolute stood open when they arrived. Another government vehicle was already parked inside agents securing the perimeter. Sarah stepped out of the SUV and looked at the compound. It felt different now, smaller somehow, less intimidating. Or maybe she was just different. This way, she said, leading Catherine toward the command center. They descended into the underground facility. Sarah's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the corridor she'd walked just days ago. The vault door stood open. Agents had been here documenting everything. The gold bars gleamed under temporary lighting. The bonds sat in their boxes, tagged and cataloged. But Sarah walked past all of it, heading for the war room. What are we looking for? Catherine asked. I don't know yet, but I'll know when I find it. The war room was exactly as she'd left it. Maps on the table, filing cabinets along the walls. The safe in the corner still open from her previous visit. Sarah started with the filing cabinets. She pulled open drawers, rifled through folders, scanned documents with desperate urgency. Operations reports, supply requisitions, intelligence summaries. Nothing that mentioned the Cross family. Then she found a folder labeled Personnel Records. Inside were files on every officer who'd served at Camp Resolute. Sarah flipped through them quickly until she found 2 names. Colonel Thomas Hartwell, Colonel William Cross. She pulled both files and spread them on the table. Her great-uncle's file was thick, detailed. Commendations. Performance reviews. A complete record of his service from 1943 until the base was decommissioned. Cross's file was thinner. Much thinner. Sarah read quickly. William Cross had been assigned to Camp Resolute in March 1945. He'd served as a logistics coordinator for 4 months, and then in July 1945 he'd been transferred out. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to a document near the bottom of Cross's file. It was a transfer order signed by the base commander, but attached to it was a memo. Colonel Cross is being reassigned due to unauthorized disclosure of classified information to civilian parties. His security clearance has been revoked. All access to sensitive materials is hereby terminated. Catherine's eyes widened. Cross's grandfather was removed for security violations. He wasn't a co-founder. He was a disgraced officer who got kicked out. Sarah kept reading. And look at this. There's a note from my great-uncle. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same careful script from the letter he'd left her. Colonel Cross attempted to sell information about Camp Resolute operations to private investors before his transfer. I have documented evidence of his communications with these parties. Should any claims arise regarding his involvement in this facility, these documents should be referenced. Sarah's heart pounded. He knew. My great-uncle knew someone would try to claim the assets eventually. He prepared for it. Where are the documents he mentioned? Sarah looked around the war room. Her great-uncle's note referenced evidence, but the personnel file didn't contain it. Then she remembered the safe. She'd opened it before, found the bonds, the letter. But had she checked everything, Sarah returned to the safe and reached inside, feeling along the back wall. Her fingers touched metal. A hidden compartment she'd missed in her rush. She pulled out a thin metal box and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. And they weren't written by her great-uncle. They were written by William Cross. Letters to banks, to investors, to foreign contacts. Letters offering classified information about American military operations in exchange for money. Letters that proved William Cross had been a traitor. This is it, Sarah breathed. This destroys his grandson's claim. Catherine was already on the phone. I need to speak with the judge's clerk immediately. We have new evidence that must be submitted before tomorrow's hearing. 3:34 p.m. Day 5. They drove back to Washington through the night. Sarah couldn't sleep. She read the letters over and over, piecing together the story of William Cross's betrayal. He'd been greedy, opportunistic. He'd seen the fortune flowing through Camp Resolute and decided he deserved a share. When he'd been caught and transferred, he'd spent the rest of his life nursing a grudge, telling his children and grandchildren that he'd been cheated out of something that belonged to him. 3 generations of lies. 3 generations of entitlement built on a foundation of treason. And now Richard Cross was trying to claim what his grandfather had never earned. Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Miss Mitchell, I hear you found some interesting documents at the base. Richard Cross's voice. Sarah recognized it from the threatening messages. How do you know what I found? I know everything that happens at Camp Resolute. I've had people watching that property for 30 years. Then you know your grandfather was a traitor. You know he was removed for selling secrets. Cross laughed. A cold, empty sound. My grandfather was a visionary. He understood that wars create opportunities. He tried to secure his family's future. He tried to commit treason. Semantics. The war was almost over. No one was hurt by what he did. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. The judge is going to see those letters tomorrow. Your claim is finished. Is it? Cross's voice dropped lower. You think a few old letters are going to stop me? I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment. I have lawyers, judges, politicians in my pocket. I have resources you can't imagine. You don't have the truth. The truth is whatever I pay people to believe. Cross paused. I'm going to make you an offer, Miss Mitchell. One final offer. $10 million. Cash. Tonight. You take it, you walk away, you never mention Camp Resolute again. And if I refuse, then I destroy you. Not just your case, your life, your reputation, everything you care about. His voice hardened. I know about Mrs. Chen, the old woman who gave you money. I know about your doctor's appointments, your prenatal records. I know you're 7 months pregnant with a girl. I know everything. Sarah's blood went cold. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm telling you the stakes. This isn't a game. This isn't some courtroom drama where the good guys always win. This is the real world. And in the real world, people like me always get what they want. Not this time. We'll see. Cross hung up. Sarah sat in the darkness, her hands shaking. Catherine was asleep in the seat beside her. The FBI agents drove in silence. Cross had threatened her daughter. Her unborn daughter. Something shifted inside Sarah. Something hard and cold and absolute. She'd been scared before. Uncertain. Overwhelmed. Not anymore. Now she was angry. 8:00 a.m., day 6. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Camera crews waited outside. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with Catherine Harrison and a team of lawyers she'd never met. Across the aisle, Richard Cross sat with his own army of attorneys. He looked at Sarah and smiled. A predator's smile. Judge Margaret Chen entered and took her seat. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. This is an emergency hearing regarding competing claims to the assets discovered at Camp Resolute, New Mexico. Both parties will present preliminary evidence. I will then determine whether this matter proceeds to full trial. She looked at Cross's lawyers. Plaintiff's counsel, you may begin. Cross's lead attorney stood, a silver-haired man with a $1,000 suit and an air of absolute confidence. Your Honor, my client's family has been seeking justice for 80 years. Colonel William Cross was instrumental in establishing Camp Resolute and its operations. He was promised a share of any assets remaining after the war. That promise was never honored. He presented documents, service records, letters allegedly proving William Cross's contributions. Sarah watched the judge review the evidence. Her stomach churned. Then Catherine stood. Your Honor, we have recently discovered documents that directly contradict the plaintiff's claims. She presented the personnel files, the transfer order, the memo about William Cross's security violations. And then she presented the letters. These are communications written by Colonel William Cross himself attempting to sell classified information to private investors. He was removed from Camp Resolute in disgrace, not denied his rightful share. His grandson's claim is based on lies told by a disgraced officer who spent his life rewriting history. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Cross's lawyers demanded a recess. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order! Order in this court! She reviewed the letters carefully. Her expression grew darker with each page. Mr. Cross, she said finally, were you aware of these documents before filing your claim? Cross stood slowly. His smile was gone. Your Honor, those letters are forgeries, fabricated by Colonel Hartwell to discredit my grandfather. The handwriting analysis will determine that. In the meantime, I'm deeply troubled by what I'm seeing. Judge Chen set down the letters. These documents, if authentic, don't just undermine your claim. They suggest your grandfather committed serious crimes against the United States. That's absurd. My grandfather was a patriot. Your grandfather, according to these letters, attempted to sell military secrets for personal profit. The judge's voice hardened. I'm ordering a full investigation. Your claim is suspended pending the outcome. Cross's face went red. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to due process, Mr. Cross, and due process requires evidence. Right now, the evidence suggests your entire claim is built on fraud. She turned to Sarah. Miss Mitchell, your evidence is compelling. However, there's still the matter of the government's interest in these assets. We'll need to schedule a full hearing to determine ownership. Sarah nodded. I understand, Your Honor. This court is adjourned. It was 10 to 23 a.m., day 6. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, security guards pushed back the crowd. Sarah walked through it all in a daze. She'd won. Not completely, not finally, but she'd won this battle. Catherine guided her to a waiting car. You did it. Cross's claim is finished. He's not going to stop. Legally, he has no options left. The fraud allegations will take years to resolve. By then, your claim will be established. Sarah shook her head. You don't understand. He threatened my daughter. He's not going to accept defeat. What do you mean he threatened your daughter? Last night, he called me. He said he knew everything about my pregnancy, my doctor, my prenatal records. Sarah's voice trembled with anger. He said if I didn't take his money and walk away, he'd destroy me. Catherine's expression hardened. We need to report this to the FBI. I already did. This morning before the hearing. Sarah looked out the window. They're investigating. 1:15 p.m., day 6. The FBI moved fast. By early afternoon, agents had obtained warrants for Richard Cross's phone records, financial accounts, and personal communications. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Sarah sat in a conference room at FBI headquarters listening to Agent Martinez explain the investigation. Cross has been surveilling you for weeks. We found evidence that he paid private investigators to track your movements, monitor your communications, and gather personal information about everyone in your life. That's harassment. That's the least of his problems. Martinez pulled out a folder. We also found communications suggesting he may have been involved in your great-uncle's death. Sarah's heart stopped. What? 2 men visited Camp Resolute 3 weeks ago, the night before Colonel Hartwell died. Cross paid them. We're still investigating whether they contributed to his death, but the timing is suspicious. He killed my great-uncle. We can't prove that yet, but we're working on it. Martinez leaned forward. In the meantime, we're placing you under protective custody. Cross is dangerous and he's desperate. That's a bad combination. Sarah thought about her baby, about the life growing inside her. Whatever it takes to keep my daughter safe. 4:48 p.m. Day 6. Sarah was moved to a secure location, a safe house in suburban Virginia, with FBI agents stationed outside. Catherine visited that evening with news. The story is everywhere. Cross's fraud, the investigation, everything. His reputation is destroyed. Good. There's more. William Bradley, the veteran who called you, has organized a group of other veterans to testify on your behalf. They want to make sure your great-uncle's legacy is protected. Sarah felt tears threatening. They barely knew me. They knew him, and they believe in what he stood for. Catherine sat down beside her. Sarah, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've seen a lot of cases, but I've never seen anything like this. Like what? Like you, a pregnant waitress taking on billionaires and the federal government, fighting for something she didn't even know existed a week ago. Catherine's voice softened. Most people would have taken the money and run. Why didn't you? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Because my great-uncle trusted me. Because he spent 70 years alone in the desert keeping a promise nobody else remembered. Because if I walked away, everything he sacrificed would mean nothing. That's called integrity. That's called stubbornness. Sarah almost smiled. My mother used to say I was the most stubborn person she'd ever met. She meant it as an insult. Turns out it's my best quality. 9:33 p.m., day 6. Sarah was getting ready for bed when her phone rang. Unknown number. But different from Cross's calls. She answered cautiously. Hello? Miss Mitchell, this is Colonel William Bradley. We spoke before. Colonel Bradley, is everything okay? I need to tell you something. Something I should have said the first time we talked. The old man's voice was heavy. I was there the night your great-uncle made his decision to stay at Camp Resolute." Sarah sat down slowly. "What happened?" It was March 1946. The war was over. We'd all received our discharge papers. Everyone was going home. Bradley paused. "But Tom came to me the night before he was supposed to leave. He said he couldn't go. He said there was something at the base that needed protecting. Something too important to abandon. The assets. More than that, the records, the evidence of what we'd done during the war." Bradley's voice cracked. "Some of those operations weren't pretty, Miss Mitchell. We did things that couldn't be acknowledged. Funded resistance fighters who committed acts that would be called terrorism today, bribed officials, eliminated threats." Sarah listened in silence. "Your great-uncle kept records of everything, not to expose anyone, but to make sure the truth existed somewhere. He said that someday someone would need to know what really happened. Someday those sacrifices would need to be honored. And he stayed to protect those records. For 70 years, I went home, got married, had children, grandchildren. Tom stayed in the desert alone, keeping a promise the rest of us forgot we'd made." Bradley's voice broke. "I should have stayed with him. I should have helped him. But I was young and stupid, and I wanted my life back. You couldn't have known. I knew enough. We all did." Bradley took a shaky breath. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're protecting. It's not just money, Miss Mitchell. It's truth. Ugly, complicated, necessary truth. And if Cross or the government gets their hands on those records, they'll bury them. They'll erase what we did, and the people who died for those operations will be forgotten forever." Sarah felt the weight of his words settling onto her shoulders. "I won't let that happen. I know you won't. Tom knew it too. That's why he chose you." After Bradley hung up, Sarah sat in the darkness for a long time. She wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for memory, for truth, for the men and women who'd sacrificed everything in operations that would never be acknowledged. Her great-uncle had understood that. He'd spent his entire life protecting it. Now it was her turn. 6:00 a.m., day 7. Sarah woke to the sound of raised voices outside her room. She was on her feet before she fully understood what was happening. Agent Martinez burst through the door. "Miss Mitchell, we need to move, now." "What's happening?" "Richard Cross escaped custody an hour ago. We think he's coming for you." Sarah's blood went cold. "How did he escape?" "We're still figuring that out, but right now we need to get you somewhere safe." They rushed her out of the safe house and into a waiting SUV. More agents followed in vehicles behind them. Sarah sat in the back seat, her hand pressed against her belly. The baby was awake now, moving restlessly as if sensing her mother's fear. "Where are we going?" "Secondary location, undisclosed. We'll keep you there until Cross is apprehended." Sarah's phone buzzed. "Unknown number." She showed it to Martinez. "Should I answer?" "Put it on speaker." She accepted the call. Richard Cross's voice filled the car. "Running again, Sarah. You should know by now that doesn't work." Martinez grabbed the phone. "Mr. Cross, this is FBI agent Martinez. You need to turn yourself in immediately." "I don't think so. I've spent too long waiting for this. I'm not going to let some pregnant waitress and a bunch of federal bureaucrats take what belongs to me. Nothing belongs to you. Your grandfather was a traitor." "My grandfather was a pioneer. He understood that the rules don't apply to people like us." Cross's voice hardened. "I have resources you can't imagine, Agent Martinez. Men loyal to me in places you'd never suspect. You think a safe house can protect her. You think moving her from location to location will keep her hidden. This is over, Cross. Your claim is destroyed. Your reputation is ruined. There's nothing left to fight for." "There's always something left. There's pride, there's legacy, there's the satisfaction of making sure nobody else gets what should have been mine." Cross paused. "Tell Sarah something for me. Tell her I'm not going to kill her. That would be too easy. I'm going to destroy everything she loves, everyone who helped her, every person who stood against me. And then when she's alone and broken and has nothing left, I'm going to make her watch as I burn Camp Resolute to the ground." The line went dead. Sarah was shaking. "He's insane." "He's desperate," Martinez said. "Desperate men make mistakes. We'll catch him." "Before or after he hurts someone?" Martinez didn't answer. 10:44 a.m., day 7. The secondary safe house was a farm outside Baltimore. No neighbors for miles. Armed agents at every entrance. Sarah paced the living room, unable to sit still. Catherine had arrived with updates, but none of them made her feel better. Cross has disappeared completely. No credit card activity, no phone signals, nothing. He has cash. He has contacts. He could be anywhere. The FBI is searching. They'll find him. Sarah stopped pacing. What about Mrs. Chen? He mentioned her specifically. Catherine's expression flickered. She's been moved to protective custody. She's safe. And Harrison, also protected. And the veterans Bradley and the others who offered to testify, Catherine hesitated. We're working on it. There are a lot of them, and resources are limited. Sarah felt sick. Cross had threatened to destroy everyone who helped her, and she'd brought all of them into this. Her phone rang. Catherine's number, even though Catherine was standing right in front of her. Sarah answered. Hello. A man's voice. Not Cross. Younger. Cold. Miss Mitchell, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Cross. He wants you to know that William Bradley's house caught fire this morning. Electrical problem, they think. He wasn't home, fortunately, but his wife was. Sarah's knees buckled. No. She's in the hospital. Critical condition, 3rd-degree burns. You monster. Mr. Cross wants you to understand the stakes. Every day you continue this fight, someone else gets hurt. Someone else's family suffers. The voice paused. There's a way to win this. You know what Mr. Cross wants. Give it to him and the pain stops. Sarah was crying now. I can't. I won't. Then more people will burn. The line went dead. Catherine caught her as she collapsed. Sarah, what happened? What did they say? Sarah couldn't speak. She could only think of Mrs. Bradley, a woman she'd never met, lying in a hospital bed because of her, because she'd refused to surrender. 2:17 p.m. Day 7. Sarah sat in a bedroom at the safe house staring at nothing. The baby kicked, but she barely felt it. Catherine came to check on her. Mrs. Bradley is stable. The doctors think she'll survive. Because of me. She's in the hospital because of me. Because of Richard Cross. He's the one who did this, not you. Sarah shook her head. If I'd taken his money, walked away, none of this would have happened. And Cross would have won. Your great-uncle's sacrifice would have meant nothing. The truth would have been buried forever. Catherine sat beside her. Sarah, I know this is hard. I know you're scared. But giving in to a man like Cross doesn't make the pain stop. It just tells him that violence works. So what do I do? Wait for him to hurt someone else? No, we fight smarter. Catherine's voice hardened. Cross thinks he's untouchable because he has money and connections, but he's made mistakes. The fire at Bradley's house, the threats on your phone, every crime leaves evidence. We use that evidence to put him away forever. Sarah looked at her. How? We set a trap. We make him think he's winning. We draw him out. Catherine leaned forward. Cross is obsessed with Camp Resolute. He'll do anything to get there, so we let him think he's going to succeed. And then we catch him in the act. 5:56 p.m. Day 7. The plan came together quickly. Sarah would return to Camp Resolute publicly, visibly. She would announce that she was giving up the fight, that she was going to surrender the assets to a neutral party. Cross would come. He wouldn't be able to resist, and when he did, the FBI would be waiting. Sarah sat in the conference room at FBI headquarters listening to Agent Martinez explain the operation. You'll be completely protected. Agents will be positioned throughout the compound. The moment Cross shows himself, we move in. And if he doesn't come, he'll come. He can't help himself. Martinez met her eyes. But I have to be honest with you, Miss Mitchell. This is dangerous. There's always a risk. Sarah touched her belly. I know. Are you sure you want to do this? She thought about her great-uncle. 70 years alone, keeping a promise nobody else remembered. She thought about Mrs. Bradley lying in a hospital bed. She thought about her daughter growing inside her, depending on her to make the right choice. I'm sure. 9:00 p.m., Day 7. The announcement went out through Jennifer Rowe's contacts at the Washington Post. Sarah Mitchell was returning to Camp Resolute tomorrow morning. She was prepared to negotiate a settlement that would end the dispute once and for all. Within an hour, Richard Cross knew. He smiled when he read the news. She's broken, he told the men gathered around him. I knew she would be eventually. They always break. What's the plan? We go to Camp Resolute. We take what's ours, and we make sure Sarah Mitchell understands the consequences of defying me. What about the FBI? The FBI will be watching from a distance. They can't arrest me for showing up at a public meeting. Cross's smile widened. But once I'm inside that base, once I have access to that vault, the rules change. He stood and looked out the window at the night sky. Tomorrow this ends, one way or another. 6:00 a.m., Day 8. Sarah arrived at Camp Resolute as the sun rose over the desert. FBI vehicles surrounded the perimeter, but they stayed back visible, but not threatening. She walked through the compound alone, retracing the steps she'd taken just days ago. The command center, the hidden door, the stairs descending into darkness. She stood in front of the vault and waited. 8:34 a.m. Day 8. Richard Cross arrived in a convoy of black SUVs. He stepped out like a king entering his domain, flanked by lawyers and security guards. Sarah met him at the entrance to the command center. "Miss Mitchell, I'm glad you came to your senses." "I'm not surrendering anything, Cross. I'm giving you a chance to walk away." His smile faltered. "What?" "The FBI has everything. Your phone calls, your threats, evidence linking you to the fire at Bradley's house." Sarah stepped closer. "It's over. You can turn yourself in now, or you can be arrested in front of the cameras. Your choice." Cross's face went red. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. A live feed of FBI agents moving into position around the compound. "They've been waiting for you." Cross looked around wildly. His security guards were already being surrounded. "You can't do this. You don't understand who you're dealing with." "I understand exactly who I'm dealing with. A man so obsessed with money that wasn't his that he burned an innocent woman." Sarah's voice hardened. "A man who threatened my daughter. A man who thought he could intimidate me into giving up." "I'll destroy you?" "You already tried. It didn't work." Agent Martinez approached with handcuffs. "Richard Cross, you're under arrest for arson, attempted extortion, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Cross lunged at Sarah. She didn't flinch. 2 agents tackled him before he could reach her. They pressed him into the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back. "This isn't over," Cross screamed. "You hear me. This will never be over." Sarah watched them drag him away. Then she turned and walked back into Camp Resolute. 11:47 a.m., Day 8. The aftermath was chaos. Media descended on the compound. Government officials demanded answers. Lawyers filed motions and countermotions. But Sarah sat quietly in her great-uncle's office, surrounded by his books, his medals, his 70 years of solitude. Catherine found her there. "It's done. Cross is in federal custody. He's not getting out anytime soon." "Good." "The government wants to negotiate. They're willing to acknowledge your inheritance rights in exchange for cooperation in cataloging the vault." "What kind of cooperation?" "Access to the historical records. Participation in documenting the operations your great-uncle protected." Catherine sat down across from her. "They're not trying to take everything anymore. They just want to preserve the history." Sarah thought about Colonel Bradley's words. The ugly, complicated, necessary truth. As long as the truth gets told. All of it. Not just the parts that make them look good. "So, I'll make sure that's in the agreement." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we negotiate." 3:15 p.m. Day 8. Sarah walked through Camp Resolute one final time before leaving. The barracks where soldiers had slept, the mess hall where they'd eaten, the command center where her great-uncle had spent 7 decades keeping watch. She stood in front of the vault surrounded by gold and bonds and history. "I did it," she whispered to the empty room. "I don't know if it was the right thing or the easy thing, but I did it." The baby kicked. Sarah smiled through her tears. "Your great-great-uncle would have been proud, I think." She touched the cold metal of a gold bar one last time. Then she turned and walked back into the light. The drive back to Washington took 6 hours. Sarah sat in the back of the government SUV, her hand resting on her belly, watching the desert fade into highway and the highway fade into city. Richard Cross was in federal custody. The immediate threat was over, but as Catherine had warned her, the fight was far from finished. 4:23 p.m. Day 8, Sarah's phone rang, Harold Harrison's number. "Miss Mitchell, I just heard the news. Cross is in custody." "It's over, Mr. Harrison. At least that part of it. I never doubted you for a moment." Harrison's voice was thick with emotion. "Thomas would be proud. I know I am." Sarah felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry constantly these days. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself. But she knew it was more than that. What happens now? Now the real work begins. The government will want to negotiate. There will be hearings, depositions, endless paperwork. Harrison paused. "But you've won the hard part. You've established that you're not someone who can be pushed around." "I don't feel like I've won anything. I feel exhausted." "That's how victory usually feels. Rest while you can. The next few weeks are going to be demanding." Sarah hung up and closed her eyes. The baby kicked gentle now, almost soothing. "We did it," Sarah whispered. "The bad man is gone." 7:15 p.m. Day 8. They arrived in Washington as evening fell. Catherine had arranged a new safe house, this one larger, more comfortable. FBI agents still guarded the perimeter, but the tension had eased. Sarah took a hot shower, the first real one in days. She stood under the water until it ran cold, letting the stress and fear wash down the drain. When she emerged, Catherine was waiting with food and news. The government's legal team wants to meet tomorrow. They're prepared to make a serious offer. What kind of offer, Shrum? Full recognition of your inheritance rights. Access to the $20 million in personal bonds your great-uncle left you. Catherine hesitated. And a proposal for the rest of the assets. What proposal? They want to establish a joint foundation. Government oversight, but you would have significant control over how the funds are used. Catherine handed her a folder. It's actually not a bad deal. You'd have the resources to do real good, and they'd have the political cover of honoring your great-uncle's legacy. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the documents. Legal language dense and complicated, but the basic structure was clear. They're trying to save face. Of course they are. They lost track of $295 million for 7 decades. That's an embarrassment they need to manage. Catherine sat down across from her. But embarrassment can work in your favor. They're motivated to settle quickly and quietly. That gives you leverage. Sarah set down the folder. What would you recommend? I'd recommend we counteroffer. Ask for more control, more transparency, more independence. Catherine leaned forward. Your great-uncle spent 70 years protecting something he believed in. Whatever agreement we make should honor that. Sarah nodded slowly. Set up the meeting. 9:00 a.m. Day 9. The negotiation took place in a conference room at the Department of Justice. Sarah sat at one end of a long table flanked by Catherine and Harrison. Government lawyers filled the other end, just as their faces carefully neutral. Miss Mitchell, the lead negotiator began, we appreciate your willingness to discuss a resolution. This has been a difficult situation for everyone involved. It's been more difficult for some than others. The negotiator cleared his throat. Yes, well, we believe the proposal we've outlined represents a fair compromise. Recognition of your inheritance rights, access to your personal assets, and a framework for managing the remaining funds. The framework gives the government too much control. We have a responsibility to ensure these assets are managed appropriately. They were originally appropriated for national security purposes. Sarah leaned forward. They were appropriated for operations that ended 80 years ago, operations that saved lives and won wars. My great-uncle spent his entire life protecting that legacy. I'm not going to let it be buried in bureaucratic red tape. What do you propose? Catherine handed over a counteroffer. An independent foundation and with a board of directors that includes veterans, historians, and community representatives. Government oversight limited to financial auditing. Full transparency in how funds are allocated. The negotiator reviewed the document. His expression shifted from neutral to uncomfortable. This would give Miss Mitchell significant autonomy. That's the point. Sarah stood up. My great-uncle trusted me to do the right thing with what he left behind. I'm asking you to trust me too. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the negotiator sighed. We'll need to discuss this with our superiors. Can we reconvene tomorrow? Take all the time you need, Rouet. I'm not going anywhere. 11:34 a.m., day 9. Sarah left the meeting feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Catherine walked beside her, practically glowing. That was impressive. You had them on the defensive the entire time. I just told the truth? The truth delivered well is the most powerful weapon there is. Catherine hailed a cab. Let's get you back to the safe house. You need to rest. Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She tensed, remembering Cross's calls. But when she answered, the voice was different. A woman's voice. Elderly. Trembling. Is this Sarah Mitchell? Yes. Who is this? My name is Eleanor Dubois. My husband was a resistance fighter in France during the war. He was killed in 1944. The woman's voice cracked. I saw the news about Camp Resolute, about the operations your great-uncle protected. Sarah stopped walking. Mrs. Dubois, I'm so sorry for your loss. I've waited 80 years to know what really happened to my Henri. 80 years of questions. And now because of you, I finally have answers. Eleanor was crying now. Thank you. Thank you for fighting for the truth. Sarah's own tears spilled over. Your husband was a hero, Mrs. Dubois. I promise you his sacrifice will be remembered. That's all I ever wanted, just to know he mattered. After the call ended, Sarah stood on the sidewalk crying openly. Catherine put an arm around her shoulders. This is why you're fighting, for people like her. I know. Sarah wiped her eyes. I know. 2:47 p.m. Day 9. Back at the safe house, Sarah found a stack of letters waiting for her. Catherine had been collecting the messages from people who'd seen the news coverage. Veterans who'd served in classified operations. Families of soldiers who'd never come home. Historians who'd spent decades piecing together the truth. All of them reaching out, offering support, sharing stories. Sarah read every letter. Some made her laugh. Some made her cry. All of them reminded her why she'd refused to give up. One letter stood out, handwritten on expensive stationery postmarked from New York. Dear Miss Mitchell, my name is Margaret Hartwell Chen. I believe I'm your cousin. My grandmother was Thomas Hartwell's sister. She always wondered what happened to him, why he disappeared after the war. She died believing he'd abandoned the family. Now I know the truth. He didn't abandon anyone. He was the most loyal man who ever lived. I would very much like to meet you if you're willing. I think there's a lot we could share. With hope, Margaret. Sarah stared at the letter for a long time. Family. She had family she'd never known about. She picked up her phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered on the second ring. Hello? Mrs. Chen, this is Sarah Mitchell. I got your letter. Silence, then a soft gasp. Oh my goodness, I didn't think you'd actually call. I almost didn't. I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. I can only imagine. I've been watching the news following the story. You've been through so much, Margaret's voice warmed. But you've done something remarkable, Sarah. You've brought Thomas home. After all these years, his family finally knows who he really was. Sarah felt tears threatening again. I didn't know I had family. I thought I was alone. You're not alone, not anymore. Margaret paused. I'm 73 years old, Sarah. I don't know how much time I have left, but I would very much like to meet my cousin before I go. I'd like that too. Then let's make it happen, as soon as you're able. 5:18 p.m., day 9. Catherine arrived with news about Mrs. Bradley. She's out of the ICU. The doctors expect a full recovery. Sarah closed her eyes in relief. Thank God. Colonel Bradley wants to talk to you. He says he has something important to share. Sarah took the phone Catherine offered. Colonel Bradley, how is your wife? She's a fighter, Miss Mitchell, just like you. Bradley's voice was stronger than the last time they'd spoken. The doctors say she'll be home by the end of the week. I'm so sorry for what happened to her. If I'd just... Stop right there. Bradley's tone sharpened. What happened to Mary was Cross's fault, not yours. You didn't burn our house. You didn't hurt an innocent woman. That monster did. But if I'd surrendered... If you'd surrendered, you'd have betrayed everything your great-uncle stood for, and Cross would have won. Men like that, they don't stop when you give them what they want. They just want more. Bradley took a breath. Mary understands that. She's proud of you. We both are. Sarah couldn't speak. The lump in her throat was too large. There's something else, Bradley continued. I've been talking to the other veterans, the ones who served at Camp Resolute. We want to testify at the final hearing, all of us. We want to tell the world what Thomas Hartwell did for this country. You'd do that. We should have done it decades ago. We were too afraid, too caught up in secrecy and protocol. But you've shown us that the truth matters more than fear. Bradley's voice cracked. Thomas deserved better from us. This is the least we can do. 8:33 p.m., day 9. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, hand on her belly, thinking about everything that had happened. 2 weeks ago, she'd been a pregnant waitress, working 3 jobs, barely surviving. Now she was at the center of a historical controversy, negotiating with the federal government, receiving letters from strangers who called her a hero. It didn't feel real. None of it felt real. The baby kicked hard and insistent. I know you're in there, Sarah whispered. I know you're counting on me. I promise I won't let you down. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart stopped. But this message was different. This is the woman who called you the night your great-uncle died, the one who warned you about Cross. I'm glad he's in custody. I'm glad you're safe. But there's something else you need to know, something I couldn't tell you before. Sarah typed back quickly. What is it? Your great-uncle didn't die of heart failure. The men Cross sent, they poisoned him. I saw them do it. I've been afraid to come forward, but after watching you fight, I know I have to. Sarah's hands were shaking. Who are you? My name is Rosa Martinez. I was your great-uncle's caretaker for the last 5 years of his life. I brought him groceries, checked on him, made sure he took his medication. The messages came faster now. The night he died, 2 men came to the base. They said they were from the government. Thomas knew they were lying. He sent me to hide. What happened? I watched through a window. They asked him questions about the vault. He refused to answer. They got angry. One of them put something in his water. Thomas knew what they were doing. He drank it anyway. Sarah's tears fell onto the phone screen. He let them kill him. He was 94 years old and dying of cancer. He knew they'd come for him eventually. He chose to go on his own terms. Rosa's next message came after a long pause. His last words were about you. He said you were the only one who could protect what he'd built. He said you were stronger than you knew. Sarah sat in the darkness for a long time, crying silently. Her great-uncle had been murdered, but he'd faced his killers with courage, with dignity, with the same sense of duty that had defined his entire life, and he'd trusted her to carry that legacy forward. 6 a.m. Day 10. Sarah woke early and called Agent Martinez. I have new information about my great-uncle's death, a witness who saw what happened. Martinez was at the safe house within an hour. Sarah told him everything Rosa had shared. By noon, FBI agents were interviewing Rosa Martinez at a secure location in New Mexico. If her testimony holds up, we can add murder charges to Cross's case, Martinez told Sarah. He'll never see the outside of a prison. Good. There's something else. Cross is trying to make a deal. He wants to testify against his accomplices in exchange for reduced charges. Sarah's jaw tightened. No deals. That's not your decision. Then make it my decision. I'll go public with everything. The murder, the cover-up, the fact that the government is protecting a man who killed a 94-year-old war hero. Sarah's voice hardened. My great-uncle deserved justice. Don't let Cross buy his way out. Martinez studied her for a long moment. I'll see what I can do. 2:15 p.m. Day 10. The government's response to Sarah's counteroffer arrived that afternoon. Catherine read it aloud, her voice growing more excited with each paragraph. They accepted almost everything. Independent foundation, veteran-led board, full transparency. She looked up at Sarah. They even agreed to name it after your great-uncle, the Thomas Hartwell Foundation. Sarah sat down slowly. They agreed. The political pressure was too much. Veterans groups have been flooding Congress with calls. The media coverage has been relentless. Catherine smiled. You won, Sarah. You actually won. Sarah didn't feel like celebrating. She felt tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that went beyond physical fatigue. What about the vault, the money? The gold and bonds will be liquidated. After taxes and legal fees, the foundation will have approximately $600 million to work with. Catherine handed her the documents. You'll have final approval over how it's used. $600 million, enough to change thousands of lives, enough to build something that mattered. Sarah looked at the papers in her hands. My great-uncle spent 70 years protecting this. I have to make sure it's used the right way. What did you have in mind? Sarah thought about Mrs. Bradley lying in a hospital bed, about Eleanor Dubois waiting 80 years to learn the truth about her husband, about Mrs. Chen who'd given her $500 without hesitation, about every single parent working 3 jobs to survive. Veteran support, historical preservation, scholarships for single parents. Sarah looked up. The people who've been forgotten, the ones who sacrifice without recognition, that's who this money should help. Catherine nodded slowly. I think your great-uncle would approve. 5:47 p.m. Day 10. Jennifer Rowe arrived for a follow-up interview. The story had evolved from a simple inheritance dispute to something much larger, a tale of duty sacrifice and the power of standing up against corruption. The public response has been overwhelming, Jennifer said. People are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who got lucky and decided to fight. That's what heroes always say. Jennifer pulled out her recorder. What's next for you? Sarah touched her belly. I'm due in 6 weeks. After my daughter is born, I'm going to build something that honors my great-uncle's memory. A foundation that helps people like me, people who are struggling to survive. And Camp Resolute? It's going to become a museum and memorial, a place where people can learn about the classified operations that helped win the war, where veterans can be honored for sacrifices that were never acknowledged. Sarah paused. My great-uncle spent 70 years protecting that place. Now it's going to protect the memory of everyone who served. What about Richard Cross? Sarah's expression hardened. He's going to prison for a very long time, and if justice is served, he'll be charged with my great-uncle's murder. Murder, that hasn't been reported. It will be, soon. A witness has come forward. Cross had my great-uncle killed when he wouldn't reveal the location of the vault. Sarah met Jennifer's eyes. Thomas Hartwell was a hero who gave up everything to protect something he believed in, and Richard Cross murdered him for money. Jennifer was silent for a moment. Can I quote you on that? Quote everything. The world needs to know who my great-uncle really was. 9:22 p.m., day 10. That night, Margaret Hartwell Chen called. Sarah, I saw the news. Murder charges, is that true? It's true. Cross had him poisoned. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. All those years, my grandmother wondered what happened to her brother. She thought he'd abandoned the family, gone off somewhere, and forgotten about all of us. Her voice broke. But he was just doing his duty, protecting something important, and he died for it. He was a hero, Margaret, the most honorable man anyone who knew him ever met. I wish I'd known him. I wish I'd had the chance to tell him that our family was proud of him. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. I think he knew. Somehow, I think he always knew. 10:45 p.m. Day 10. The final legal hearing was scheduled for the following week. Catherine had assembled a team of lawyers, historians, and veteran advocates to present their case. But Sarah had one more thing to do before then. She called Colonel Bradley. Colonel, I need to ask you something personal. Anything, Miss Mitchell. My daughter is due in 6 weeks. I don't have any family. My mother died when I was 20. I never knew my father. Sarah took a breath. I was wondering if you and Mrs. Bradley would consider being her honorary grandparents. Silence on the line, then a sound that might have been a sob. Miss Mitchell, that would be the greatest honor of my life. Call me Sarah, please. Sarah. Bradley's voice was thick with emotion. You've given us more than you know. After the war, after all the secrecy and silence, I thought those years were lost. But you've brought them back. You've made them mean something again. My great-uncle did that. I'm just finishing what he started. No, Sarah. He kept the secret. You revealed the truth. That takes a different kind of courage. 6:00 a.m., day 14. The morning of the final hearing arrived cold and clear. Sarah dressed carefully in the one professional outfit she owned, a dark blue dress that barely fit over her 8-month belly. Catherine picked her up at 7. Are you ready? No, but I'm going to do it anyway. The courtroom was packed. Veterans in uniform filled the gallery. Reporters lined the walls. Government officials sat in reserved seats, their expressions carefully neutral. Judge Margaret Chen presided, the same judge who'd heard the initial arguments against Richard Cross. This hearing is to determine the final disposition of assets discovered at Camp Resolute, New Mexico, Datu, the judge announced. Both parties have submitted comprehensive briefs. I'll hear final arguments before rendering my decision. The government's lawyer went first. He acknowledged the unique circumstances, praised Sarah's courage, and recommended approval of the settlement agreement. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood slowly, her belly pressing against the table. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Your Honor, I never expected to be here. 2 weeks ago, I was a waitress working 3 jobs, 7 months pregnant, barely surviving. Sarah's voice was steady. Then I found out that my great-uncle, a man I'd met once when I was 4 years old, had left me something extraordinary. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Colonel Thomas Hartwell spent 70 years alone in the desert guarding assets that the government forgot existed. He gave up marriage, family, a normal life because he believed that some things were worth protecting. Some promises were worth keeping. The courtroom was silent. He was murdered for that dedication. Richard Cross sent men to kill him because he wouldn't reveal the location of the vault. A 94-year-old man dying of cancer, poisoned because he wouldn't betray his duty. Sarah's voice cracked. That's who my great-uncle was, and that's why I fought so hard to honor his memory. She looked at the veterans in the gallery. Colonel Bradley sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face. These men served with my great-uncle. They know what he sacrificed. They've come here today to testify that he deserved better than being forgotten. Sarah turned back to the judge. I'm asking this court to approve the settlement agreement, to establish the Thomas Hartwell Foundation, to turn Camp Resolute into a place that honors not just my great-uncle, but everyone who served in classified operations without recognition. She sat down heavily. Catherine squeezed her hand. Judge Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. I've presided over many cases in my career, but I've never seen anything quite like this. She looked at Sarah. Miss Mitchell, you've demonstrated extraordinary courage under circumstances that would have broken most people. You fought for something you believed in even when powerful forces tried to stop you." Sarah held her breath. "The settlement agreement is approved. The Thomas Hartwell Foundation is hereby established. Camp Resolute will be designated as a historical site and memorial." The judge paused. "And I hope that somewhere Colonel Hartwell knows that his sacrifice was not in vain." The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah sat frozen, unable to move. Catherine hugged her. Harrison shook her hand. Veterans crowded around, offering congratulations, but Sarah barely heard any of it. She'd won. After everything she'd won, her great-uncle's legacy was secure. 12:34 p.m., day 14. The celebration continued outside the courthouse. Media surrounded Sarah, shouting questions, snapping photographs. She answered as many as she could, but exhaustion was setting in. Catherine finally rescued her, guiding her to a waiting car. "You need to rest. The baby needs you to rest." "I know, I just can't believe it's over." "It's not over. It's just beginning." Catherine smiled. "You have a foundation to build, a museum to establish, a daughter to raise." Sarah touched her belly. She kicked through the entire hearing. I think she knew something important was happening. "She has a remarkable mother. She'll know a lot of important things." 3:56 p.m., day 14. Sarah returned to the safe house to find it filled with flowers. Arrangements from veterans groups, from government officials, from strangers who'd seen the news. One bouquet stood out. Simple white roses with a card attached. "Congratulations on your victory. Your great-uncle would be proud. I know I am. Rosa Martinez." Sarah held the card against her heart. The woman who'd watched Thomas Hartwell die. The woman who'd helped bring his killers to justice. Sarah made a mental note to find Rosa, to thank her in person, to make sure she knew how much her courage had meant. 6:15 p.m., day 14. That evening, Sarah received a call she'd been dreading. "Miss Mitchell, this is Agent Martinez. I have news about Richard Cross." "What happened?" "He tried to escape during a prisoner transfer. There was a confrontation with guards." Martinez paused. "He didn't make it." Sarah sat down slowly. "He's dead. Yes, I know it's not the justice you were hoping for, but it's exactly the justice he deserved." Sarah's voice was cold. "He murdered my great-uncle. He terrorized innocent people. He burned a woman who'd done nothing wrong." She took a breath. "I'm glad he's gone." "I understand." "What about the murder charges?" "We have enough evidence to close the case. Cross's accomplices are cooperating. Your great-uncle's death will be officially recognized as homicide." Martinez's voice softened. "It's over, Miss Mitchell. Really over this time." Sarah hung up and sat in the silence. Richard Cross was dead. The man who'd threatened her daughter, who'd killed her great-uncle, who'd tried to steal everything, was gone forever. She should have felt relief, triumph, closure. Instead, she felt empty. The baby kicked gentle and reassuring. "It's okay," Sarah whispered. "The bad man is really gone now. You're safe. We're both safe." 9:00 p.m., day 14. Margaret Hartwell Chen arrived in Washington that night. Sarah met her at the hotel, nervous in a way she hadn't felt since the first day of this ordeal. The woman who stepped out of the elevator was small and elegant, with silver hair and eyes that reminded Sarah startlingly of her own. "Sarah." "Mrs. Chen, Margaret, I don't know what to call you." "Family." Margaret crossed the lobby and embraced Sarah carefully, mindful of her belly. "Call me family." Sarah held on tight, tears flowing freely. "I never had family. I never knew." "I know, dear, I know." Margaret pulled back and studied Sarah's face. "You look so much like him, Thomas, the same determination in your eyes." "You remember him?" "I was only 5 when he left, but I remember a tall man with sad eyes who told me to be brave." Margaret smiled through her tears. "I never understood what he meant until now." They talked for hours. Margaret shared stories about Thomas's family, his childhood, the life he'd left behind. Sarah shared what she'd learned about his years at Camp Resolute, his dedication, his sacrifice. By the end of the night, they were no longer strangers. They were family. 11:47 p.m., day 14. Sarah lay in bed that night, her hand on her belly, thinking about everything that had happened. Her great-uncle had spent 70 years alone because he believed in something. He'd given up everything, sacrificed everything for a promise no one else remembered. And in the end, his faith had been rewarded. Not through wealth or recognition, through her. through the family that had finally found him. "I understand now," Sarah whispered to the darkness. "I understand why you chose me." The baby kicked strong and certain. Sarah smiled. She had a foundation to build, a museum to create, a daughter to raise, and for the first time in her life she had family to help her do it. The legacy of Thomas Hartwell was secure, and Sarah Mitchell was just getting started. 6 weeks passed like a fever dream. Sarah moved through them in a haze of preparation, negotiation, and anticipation. The foundation's legal structure was finalized. The museum planning began, and her daughter grew stronger, inside her kicking more insistently each day, reminding Sarah that time was running out. 8:23 a.m., day 42. Sarah woke to a sharp pain in her lower back. She lay still for a moment, breathing through it, waiting. The pain faded, then returned. Stronger this time, she grabbed her phone and called Catherine. "It's happening! The baby's coming! I'll be there in 15 minutes, don't move!" Sarah laughed despite the pain. "I don't think I could move if I tried." The contractions came faster after that. By the time Catherine arrived, Sarah was doubled over, gripping the edge of her bed. How far apart? 5 minutes, maybe less. "We need to go, now." The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and traffic, and Catherine's voice talking her through each contraction. Sarah barely registered arriving, being wheeled through corridors, being transferred to a bed. Then there were doctors and nurses and beschwindig British and machines beeping and someone telling her to push. "I can't," Sarah gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Catherine gripped her hand. "You've faced down the federal government. You've survived threats and attacks and a man who tried to destroy you. You can do this." Sarah pushed. The pain was overwhelming, all-consuming, like nothing she'd ever experienced. But beneath it was something else. Determination, the same stubborn refusal to quit that had carried her through the past 2 months. "One more push," the doctor said. "Just one more." Sarah screamed and pushed with everything she had, and then suddenly there was crying, a tiny, furious wail that filled the room with life. "It's a girl," the nurse announced. "A healthy baby girl." They placed the baby on Sarah's chest, warm and squirming and impossibly small. Sarah looked down at her daughter's face, at the eyes that were already trying to focus, at the tiny fingers curling and uncurling. "Hello," Sarah whispered. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you." The baby stopped crying. She looked up at Sarah with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so new to the world. Catherine was crying. The nurses were smiling. The doctor was already moving on to the next steps, but Sarah saw none of it. She only saw her daughter. "I'm going to name you Hope," she said softly, "because that's what you are. That's what you've always been." 11:15 a.m., day 42. The hospital room filled with visitors throughout the day. Catherine came and went, handling phone calls, managing the endless details that couldn't wait even for a birth. Harold Harrison arrived with flowers and tears in his eyes. "She's beautiful, Sarah, absolutely beautiful." "She has my great-uncle's eyes, that same intensity. She has your strength. I can already tell." Colonel Bradley and his wife Mary came in the afternoon. Mary was still recovering from her burns, moving slowly, but she insisted on making the trip. "Let me see that baby," Mary demanded. "I've been waiting too long for this moment." Sarah handed Hope to her, watching the elderly woman's face transform with joy. "Hello, little one. I'm your honorary grandmother, and I'm going to spoil you absolutely rotten." Bradley stood beside his wife, his weathered face soft with emotion. "Thomas would have loved this," he said quietly. "He always wanted a family. He gave that up for his duty, but now in a way he has one." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I wish he could have met her." "He's meeting her right now," Bradley said. "Wherever he is, he's watching. I'm sure of it." 3:47 p.m. Day 42. Margaret Hartwell. Chen arrived last, carrying a small wrapped package. "I brought something for the baby, something that belonged to Thomas." She unwrapped a small, silver frame containing a photograph. A young man in uniform standing at attention, eyes bright with purpose. "That's Thomas before the war, before Camp Resolute, before everything changed." Margaret placed the frame on the bedside table. "I thought Hope should know what her great-great-uncle looked like when he still had his whole life ahead of him." Sarah studied the photograph. The young Thomas Hartwell looked nothing like the sad-eyed hermit she'd imagined. He looked hopeful, determined, ready to take on the world. He was so young. He was 22, same age you were when you joined the army. Margaret sat beside the bed. "You're more alike than you know Sarah. Both of you willing to sacrifice everything for something you believe in. Hope stirred in Sarah's arms, making a small sound of protest. She's hungry, Sarah said. She's got strong opinions already. That's the Hartwell blood, Margaret smiled. We've always been stubborn. 7:23 p.m. Day 42. By evening, the hospital room was quiet. Catherine had gone home. The visitors had departed. Sarah lay in bed with Hope sleeping against her chest, listening to the steady rhythm of her daughter's breathing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. I saw the news. Congratulations, Sarah. I knew you could do it. Sarah typed back with one hand. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Your $500 changed my life. You changed your own life. I just gave you a push. When I get home, I want to see you. I want Hope to meet the woman who believed in her mother. I'll be counting the days. Sarah set down the phone and looked at her daughter. You're going to meet so many people who love you, she whispered. You have no idea how lucky you are. Hope slept on peaceful and unaware of the extraordinary circumstances of her birth. 9:00 a.m. Day 45. Sarah left the hospital 3 days later with Hope strapped into a car seat that Catherine had purchased. The drive back to her temporary apartment was surreal, every bump and turn taking on new significance now that she was responsible for another human being. Catherine helped her inside, helped her set up the nursery, helped her figure out the breast pump and the bottle warmer, and the 1,000 other tiny details of new motherhood. The foundation board is meeting tomorrow, Catherine said finally. You don't have to attend, everyone will understand. I'll be there. Sarah, you just gave birth 3 days ago. You need to rest. I'll rest when my great-uncle's legacy is secure. Sarah looked at Hope sleeping in her crib. She's why I'm doing this, all of it. I want her to grow up knowing that her mother built something that mattered. Catherine sighed. I'll have them bring the meeting to you. Video conference, no travel required. That works. 10:00 a.m., day 46. The first official meeting of the Thomas Hartwell Foundation Board took place via video conference with Sarah participating from her living room, Hope sleeping in her arms. Colonel Bradley was there representing the veterans community. Margaret Chen represented the family. Catherine served as legal counsel, and 3 other members, historians and nonprofit specialists, rounded out the group. Our first order of business, Catherine began, is establishing the Foundation's priorities. We have approximately $600 million in assets. How do we use them to honor Colonel Hartwell's memory? Sarah spoke first. My great-uncle spent 70 years protecting something he believed was worth protecting. But he wasn't just guarding money, he was guarding memory. The memory of operations that saved lives. The memory of sacrifices that were never acknowledged. She paused. I think our first priority should be telling those stories. The museum at Camp Resolute, Bradley agreed. A place where people can learn what really happened during the war, what men like Thomas did in the shadows. But it can't just be a museum, Margaret added. It needs to be a living memorial, a place that continues to serve. Sarah nodded. Transitional housing for homeless veterans, job training programs, mental health services, all the things the government promised and never delivered. The board discussed and debated for 3 hours. By the end, they had a framework. A museum and memorial at Camp Resolute. A national network of veteran support services. Scholarships for single parents seeking education. Grants for families of classified operatives who never received recognition. One more thing, Sarah said as the meeting wound down. I want to create a program specifically for people like me, single mothers working multiple jobs barely surviving, women who need a chance. What kind of programs, sir? Emergency assistance, short-term housing, childcare support, the things that make the difference between sinking and swimming. Sarah looked at Hope. 2 months ago, I had $47 in my checking account. If I hadn't inherited this fortune, I'd still be working 3 jobs, exhausted and desperate. There are millions of women in that situation right now. We can help them. The board voted unanimously to approve. 2:15 p.m., day 60. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of motherhood and administration. Sarah learned to change diapers and negotiate contracts. She learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and still make decisions that affected millions of dollars. Hope grew stronger every day. She smiled for the first time on day 52. She laughed for the first time on day 58. Each milestone felt like a victory, and slowly the foundation took shape. Architects began designing the museum at Camp Resolute. Construction crews started renovating the barracks into transitional housing. Social workers were hired to run the veteran support programs. The media followed every development. Sarah gave interviews when she could, always with Hope nearby, always emphasizing that she was just finishing what her great-uncle had started. "What made you decide to fight?" one reporter asked. "I didn't decide, I just couldn't do anything else." Sarah adjusted Hope in her arms. "My great-uncle trusted me with something important. I couldn't betray that trust." "What do you hope your daughter learns from all this?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "That doing the right thing is hard, that it costs something, but that it's always worth it." 4:33 p.m. Day 90. 3 months after the court ruling, Sarah returned to Camp Resolute for the first time since the trial. The compound had been transformed. Construction equipment filled the space between buildings. Workers swarmed over scaffolding. The abandoned military base was becoming something new. Sarah walked through the compound with Hope strapped to her chest, showing her daughter the place where everything had begun. "This is where your great-great-uncle lived," she said softly, "for 70 years all alone. Can you imagine he stayed here because he believed it mattered?" Hope gurgled in response. Sarah made her way to the command center. The building had been cleaned and restored. Its corridors now lit with modern lighting. She descended the familiar stairs into the underground facility. The vault was empty now. The gold had been sold, the bonds, the cash deposited into the Foundation's accounts. But the room remained preserved exactly as Sarah had found it. "This is where the treasure was," she told Hope. "Millions of dollars hidden in the dark. But the real treasure was never the money. It was the truth, the stories, the memories of people who sacrificed everything and were never recognized." She walked to the wall where a new plaque had been installed. "In honor of Colonel Thomas Hartwell, 1924-2024, who gave his life to protect what others forgot, who kept his promise when no one else remembered, who proved that one person standing alone can make a difference." Sarah touched the plaque, tears streaming down her face. "I hope I made you proud," she whispered. "I hope this is what you wanted." The air seemed to shift, warm, accepting. It felt like an answer. 6:00 p.m., day 90. That evening, Sarah sat in her great-uncle's quarters, now restored and converted into a memorial room. Hope slept in her carrier, while Sarah read through documents she'd never had time to examine before. Letters, dozens of them, written by Thomas over the decades never sent. Letters to his sister explaining why he couldn't come home. Letters to commanding officers who'd retired or died asking for guidance that never came. Letters to the families of men who'd died in operations funded by the vault. And at the bottom of the stack, dark letters to her. Not just the one he'd left on his desk. Others, written over years. "Dear Sarah, you're 5 years old today. I wish I could send you a birthday present. I wish I could tell you who I am. But some things have to wait. Someday when you're older, you'll understand. Dear Sarah, you're 18 today. I heard you joined the army. Your mother must be furious. I'm proud of you. You understand duty in a way most people never will. Dear Sarah, you're 26 now. You left the army last year. I know why. I know about the pregnancy, about the father who abandoned you. I wish I could help. I wish I could tell you that it gets better. It does. I promise. You're stronger than you know. Dear Sarah, you're 32. I'm 94. I don't have much time left, but I've made arrangements. Everything I've protected, everything I've guarded, it's all going to you. You're the only one I trust. You're the only one who will understand." Sarah sobbed as she read, clutching the letters to her chest. Her great-uncle had watched over her from a distance her entire life. He'd never made contact, never revealed himself, but he'd always been there. Caring. Hoping. Waiting for the day he could pass on his burden to someone worthy. She understood now why he'd chosen her. Not because she was special or extraordinary, because she was family. And for Thomas Hartwell, family meant everything. 10:00 a.m. Day 180. 6 months after Hope's birth, the Thomas Hartwell Museum and Memorial opened its doors. The ceremony drew hundreds of people, veterans in uniform, families of classified operatives, government officials, media from around the world. They gathered in front of the restored command center, waiting for the dedication. Sarah stood at the podium with Hope in her arms. The baby was wide-eyed, taking in the crowds, the cameras, the extraordinary moment. "My great-uncle spent 70 years alone in this desert," Sarah began. 70 years of silence, 70 years of keeping a promise that no one else remembered. She paused, looking out at the crowd. He wasn't a famous man. He never sought recognition or reward. He did what he did because he believed it was right. Because he understood that some things are too important to abandon, too precious to forget. Hope squirmed, reaching toward the microphone. The crowd laughed softly. "This museum isn't just about Colonel Thomas Hartwell. It's about all the men and women who served in operations that could never be acknowledged. It's about families who waited decades for answers. It's about sacrifices that deserved recognition and never received it. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Until now? She gestured to the memorial wall behind her. 200 feet of granite covered with names. Every name on this wall represents a life. A person who believed they were fighting for something that mattered, who trusted that their country would remember them. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That trust was betrayed for 80 years, but today we're making it right. Colonel Bradley stepped forward to cut the ribbon. His hands trembled, but his voice was clear. On behalf of every veteran who served in classified operations, I declare this museum and memorial officially open. May it stand forever as a testament to those who sacrificed in silence, and may we never forget what they gave for us. The ribbon fell, the crowd cheered, and Sarah felt something shift in the universe, something settling into place, something finally complete. 2:34 p.m. Day 180. The crowds wandered through the museum, marveling at the exhibits. Sarah stood near the vault entrance, watching families discover the truth about operations their loved ones had participated in. Eleanor Dubois found her there. The elderly French woman moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were bright. "Miss Mitchell, I had to come. I had to see it for myself." "Mrs. Dubois, I'm so glad you're here. My Henri's name is on the wall." Eleanor's voice trembled. "After 80 years, he's finally recognized, finally honored. He was always a hero, now the world knows it." Eleanor reached out and touched Sarah's hand. "You did this. You fought when everyone said to surrender. You kept going when it would have been easier to stop." The old woman smiled through her tears. "Henri would have loved you. He always admired people with courage. I just did what my great-uncle would have wanted. You did more than that. You gave hope to people who had given up. You proved that the truth matters." Eleanor squeezed Sarah's hand. "My family will never forget what you've done. Never." 4:56 p.m., day 180. As the sun began to set, Sarah walked through the transitional housing units that had been carved out of the old barracks. 20 veterans had already moved in, men and women who'd been homeless, forgotten, cast aside by the country they'd served. Now they had beds, hot meals, counseling, job training. James Cooper was one of them. The Special Forces veteran who'd spent 3 years on the streets had been one of the first to apply. "Miss Mitchell?" He rose when she approached, standing at attention out of habit. "Please sit. I'm just checking in. How are you settling in?" "It's more than I ever expected." James's voice cracked. "After everything I went through, I never thought I'd feel like a person again. But here, people see me. They understand what I've been through. That's what this place is for, to remind people that they matter. It's working." James wiped his eyes. "I've got a job interview next week. First one in 4 years. The counselors here helped me with my resume, my interview skills, everything." "That's wonderful, James. I want you to know something, Miss Mitchell." He met her eyes. "Whatever happens with that interview, you've already saved my life. You gave me back my dignity. You made me believe I could be something again." Sarah blinked back tears. "You were always something, James. The world just forgot. We're here to remind them." 7:15 p.m., day 180. The dedication ceremony concluded with a private dinner for Sarah, her family, and the core team who'd made everything possible. Catherine raised a glass. "To Sarah Mitchell, who started as a pregnant waitress and became the guardian of a billion-dollar legacy." "To Colonel Thomas Hartwell," Bradley added, "who taught us that duty doesn't end when it's convenient." "To family," Margaret said, looking at Sarah with warmth. "The kind we're born with, and the kind we choose." Sarah stood Hope sleeping against her shoulder. "When this started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared and overwhelmed and completely out of my depth." She looked around the table at the people who'd become her family. "But I wasn't alone. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You fought with me when I wanted to give up. You're the reason any of this happened." She raised her glass. "To everyone at this table, and to everyone who helped along the way. Mrs. Chen, who gave me $500 and told me to do what needed to be done. Rosa Martinez, who risked everything to tell the truth. Jennifer Rowe, who made sure the world heard the story." Sarah's voice broke. "This isn't my victory, it's ours." They drank in silence. Then Margaret spoke again. "What comes next, Sarah, now that the museum is open, the foundation is running, the battle is won?" Sarah looked at Hope, Her daughter's eyes were closed, her breathing steady. So small, so perfect, so full of possibility. Now I raise my daughter. I teach her about her great-great-uncle. I show her what it means to do the right thing even when it's hard. Sarah smiled. And I keep building. There's so much more to do, more veterans to help, more single parents to support, more stories to tell. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. Sarah kissed Hope's forehead. But I've got good people around me, and I've got a little girl who's going to remind me every day why it matters. 9:33 p.m. Day 180. After the dinner ended, Sarah walked alone through the compound one last time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the buildings her great-uncle had guarded for 7 decades. She found herself at the memorial wall, standing before the names etched in granite. So many names, so many stories, so many sacrifices. I did it, she said to the empty night. I don't know if it's exactly what you wanted, but I tried. I tried to honor what you built. The wind shifted, soft, gentle, like a hand touching her shoulder. I wish you could meet Hope. She's got your eyes, you know, that same intensity. Margaret says it's the Hartwell blood. Sarah laughed softly. She's going to be stubborn, I can already tell. She's going to drive me crazy. She touched one of the names on the wall, a soldier who died in France in 1944, a man whose family had waited 80 years for recognition. I'm going to tell her about all of them. Every name on this wall, every story. I'm going to make sure she understands what sacrifice means. Sarah's voice strengthened. And when she's old enough, if she wants to help, she can. She can carry on what you started, what I'm continuing. The night was silent, but not empty. Sarah felt her great-uncle's presence, his approval, his peace. He'd been carrying a burden for 70 years, and now finally it was lifted. Rest now, Sarah whispered. I've got this. She turned and walked back toward the lights of the museum, back toward her daughter, back toward the future she was building. 6:00 a.m., 1 year later. The first anniversary of the Thomas Hartwell Foundation fell on a perfect spring morning. Sarah woke early before Hope and stood at the window of her new home in Dusty Springs, watching the sun rise over the desert. So much had changed in a year. The museum had welcomed over 100,000 visitors. The veteran housing program had served 500 men and women. The single-parent scholarships had helped 200 mothers start new lives. And Sarah had changed too. She wasn't a struggling waitress anymore. She wasn't a woman working 3 jobs to survive. She was a mother, a leader, a guardian of something that mattered. Hope stirred in her crib. Sarah walked over and lifted her daughter, now a year old, already walking, already talking in fragments of words that made perfect sense to her and no one else. Good morning, sunshine. Big day today. Mama? Hope said her favorite word, the one she used for everything. That's right. Mama's going to give a speech today. You want to come? Hope clapped her hands. She loved crowds, loved attention, was already showing signs of the Hartwell stubbornness Sarah knew so well. 10:00 a.m., 1 year later. The anniversary ceremony drew an even larger crowd than the opening. Veterans filled the grounds. Families who'd been helped by the foundation stood with signs expressing gratitude. Media documented everything. Sarah took the podium with Hope on her hip. 1 year ago, I stood here and promised that we would build something that mattered, that we would honor my great-uncle's sacrifice, that we would help people who'd been forgotten. She looked at the crowd. I'm proud to say that we've kept that promise, but we're not done. We'll never be done. There are still veterans sleeping on the streets. Still single parents working 3 jobs. Still families waiting to learn what happened to loved ones who served in classified operations. Hope grabbed the microphone. The crowd laughed as Sarah gently pried it away. This little one is going to grow up knowing that her great-great-uncle gave everything for something he believed in. She's going to understand that duty isn't about convenience. It's about commitment. It's about standing up when it's hard, not just when it's easy. Sarah's voice grew stronger. My great-uncle spent 70 years alone in the desert, keeping a promise no one else remembered. He never complained, never asked for recognition, never gave up. He just did what needed to be done day after day, year after year, until the very end. She looked at the memorial wall. That's the kind of legacy I want to leave. For my daughter, not wealth, not fame, but the knowledge that her mother fought for what was right, that she helped people who needed it, that she made the world a little bit better than she found it. Hope squirmed, reaching toward the crowd, wanting to be part of the energy. And I'm not doing this alone. Every person who's volunteered, donated, spread the word you're all part of this. This isn't Sarah Mitchell's foundation, it's Thomas Hartwell's legacy, and it belongs to everyone who believes that duty matters, that sacrifice deserves recognition, that the forgotten deserve to be remembered. She raised her hand. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. And thank you for helping us keep a promise that was made 80 years ago and never kept, until now. The applause rolled across the desert like thunder. 12:45 p.m. 1 year later. After the ceremony, Sarah found a quiet moment near the memorial wall. Hope was with Margaret, being thoroughly spoiled as promised. Colonel Bradley found her there. Beautiful speech, Sarah. I meant every word. I know you did. That's what made it beautiful. Bradley stood beside her, looking at the names. I've been thinking about Thomas lately, about how alone he must have felt sometimes. I think about that too. But he wasn't really alone, was he? He had his purpose, his duty, the knowledge that what he was doing mattered. Bradley turned to face her. I think that's what kept him going. Not the money or the history, the certainty that his sacrifice had meaning. Do you think he ever doubted? Probably. Everyone doubts sometimes. Bradley smiled. But he kept going anyway. That's what makes a hero, not the absence of doubt, the choice to act despite it. Sarah nodded slowly. I doubt all the time, whether I'm doing enough, whether I'm doing it right, whether Hope is going to grow up thinking her mother was a good person or just someone who got lucky. She's going to grow up knowing her mother was a warrior, someone who fought for what she believed in, someone who refused to quit when everyone said she should. Bradley's voice roughened. That's the greatest gift you can give her. Not the money, the example. 3:30 p.m., 1 year later. Mrs. Chen arrived in the afternoon. She'd been reluctant to travel, but Sarah had insisted. I needed you to see this, Sarah said, walking her through the compound. You were the first person who believed in me. Before the lawyers, before the government, before anyone. You gave me $500 and told me to do what needed to be done. I gave you seed money, Mrs. Chen said. You did the growing. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Mrs. Chen stopped at the memorial wall. She read some of the names, her weathered face thoughtful. My husband served in the Pacific, she said quietly. He never talked about what he did, but he had nightmares sometimes. Nightmares that told me more than he ever said with words. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, Sarah. A lot that old women like me carry in silence. Chen touched one of the names on the wall. But this is good. This place, this memorial. It tells people that the silence had meaning, that the nightmares were for something. Sarah hugged her carefully. Thank you for everything. No thanks needed. You're doing exactly what I would have done if I'd had the chance. Mrs. Chen pulled back and studied Sarah's face. Now where's that granddaughter of mine I need to teach her some words in Chinese? 5:47 p.m., 1 year later. As the sun began to set on the anniversary celebration, Sarah sat on the steps of the museum with Hope in her lap. The crowds had thinned, the speeches were done, the ceremony was ending. But Sarah felt no desire to leave. This place, this compound that had been her great-uncle's prison and purpose had become something new. A sanctuary, a memorial, a second home. Hope pointed at the memorial wall, babbling in her private language. That's right, baby. That's the wall with all the names, all the heroes. Sarah kissed her daughter's head. Your great-great-uncle spent his whole life protecting this place, and now it's going to protect the memory of everyone who served. Margaret appeared, lowering herself onto the steps beside them. Mind if I join you? Of course not. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and orange. I've been thinking about family, Margaret said finally. How strange it is that I had to wait until I was 73 to find a cousin I never knew existed. Family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. Sarah looked at her. You chose to reach out. You chose to be part of this. That makes you family. Thomas would have liked that answer. Margaret smiled. He always believed that the family you build matters more than the family you're born into. How do you know that? Because he wrote to me once, just once, when I was 16. Margaret's voice grew distant. He said he was sorry he couldn't be part of my life. He said the choices he'd made meant he had to stay away. But he said that someday, if I ever needed family, I should look for his legacy, and I would find it. Sarah's throat tightened. You never told me that? I forgot about it for years. Thought it was just the ramblings of an eccentric uncle. Margaret looked at the museum. Now I understand. He knew this day would come. He knew that someday someone would find what he'd protected, and he wanted me to be ready. Hope reached toward Margaret, grabbing at her necklace. The old woman laughed and let her play with it. She's beautiful, Sarah. She's going to do extraordinary things. She already has. Just by being born, she changed everything. 7:00 p.m., 1 year later. The stars came out over Camp Resolute. The last visitors departed. The staff closed up the museum and headed home, but Sarah remained. She walked through the compound one final time, Hope sleeping in her arms, retracing the steps she'd taken a year ago when she'd first arrived. The command center where she'd found her great-uncle's letter. The hidden stairs where she'd descended into darkness. The vault now empty but still preserved a reminder of what had been guarded there for 70 years. She stood in the center of the vault and spoke to the silence. I hope you can see this. I hope you know what we've built. Sarah's voice was steady. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's something that will last. Something that will help people. Something that honors everything you sacrificed. Hope stirred, murmuring in her sleep. This is my daughter, your great-great-niece. She's going to grow up hearing stories about you, about how you kept a promise for 70 years, about how you never gave up even when everyone else forgot. Sarah touched the wall of the vault. I'm going to make sure she understands what you did, what it cost, why it mattered. Her voice broke. And when she's old enough, if she wants to, she can carry on the work. She can be the next guardian. The vault was silent, but not empty. Sarah felt her great-uncle's presence one last time. His approval, his love, his peace. Rest now, she whispered. Your duty is done. Mine is just beginning. She turned and walked out of the vault, up the stairs, out of the command center. The night air was cool and clean. The stars blazed overhead. The memorial wall gleamed in the moonlight. Sarah stood before it, her daughter in her arms, and made a promise. I will remember. I will honor. I will continue. She looked at the names on the wall. All those lives, all those sacrifices, all those stories that deserved to be told. You are not forgotten. You will never be forgotten. Not as long as I live. Not as long as my daughter lives. Not as long as this foundation stands. Hope opened her eyes, looked up at her mother, smiled, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that everything was going to be okay. Not easy, never easy, but okay, because she wasn't alone anymore. She had family, she had purpose, she had a legacy to protect, and a daughter to raise, and she had the example of a man who'd spent 70 years alone in the desert keeping a promise no one else remembered simply because it was the right thing to do. Sarah Mitchell had started as a pregnant waitress with $47 in her bank account and no hope for the future. She had become the guardian of a $600 million fortune, the founder of a foundation that helped thousands, the keeper of secrets that had been buried for 80 years. But more than that, she had become the woman her great-uncle always believed she could be. Strong, determined, unwavering. A woman who understood that duty isn't about what's convenient. A woman who proved that ordinary people, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, can rise to meet them. A woman who showed the world that some promises are worth keeping no matter the cost. The story of Thomas Hartwell had ended 70 years ago in silence and solitude, but the story of Sarah Mitchell was just beginning, and it would be told for generations to come. Because that's what legacies are. Not the money we leave behind, not the buildings we construct, but the lives we touch, the people we help, the promises we keep. Sarah Mitchell understood that now, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure her daughter understood it too. In the desert night, with the stars wheeling overhead and her daughter sleeping in her arms, Sarah made one final vow. She would never forget. She would never surrender. She would never stop fighting for what was right, because that's what Thomas Hartwell would have wanted, and that's what Hope deserved. The promise had been made. The promise would be kept forever.